Okay.
Any other questions, comments, or proposed changes? All those in favor of the adjustment? Okay, that's it 5-0. So next up, we have 6A, Meredith.
So I feel like we've been trying to do this for some time. We have with us tonight Ed Lesky. Ed, so that the folks at home can see you. Why don't you and I come up and just stand maybe so the owl captures us if we stand right here. I think that will do this. Yes, there we are. So I think everyone on the screen and everyone here knows Officer Lesky was our SRO for many years. I think in the district, and stepped away from the position to take another role in the town as of the end of 2022. And we wanted to ask him here so we could just express appreciation in a public setting to let you know how much your service meant to the district. And staff put together this book of memories for you with some notes. And I think this picture on the cover really captures kind of the essence of the kind of leadership Ed had in the role, where he was out among students and in the school and in the cafeteria and by the buses, and, you know, wishing students well as they left on this last day that he was on the job as our SRO. And so I'd just like to read the entry that I wrote, because I think it summarizes my thoughts and probably the thoughts of many. Dear Ed, on behalf of the student, staff, and parents of RSU 26, I want to express gratitude for your many contributions to our school district for the years you served as SRO. Your easy smile and warm greeting were consistently present, no matter the circumstance. The many ways you integrated yourself into the school to build relationships were so appreciated. Whether it was greeting students as they got off the bus, reading to a class, or helping out in the cafeteria, students and staff saw you as an integral part of the school community. All of this is a credit to you and the way you carried out your role as SRO so effectively. You're hands down the best SRO I've worked with in my 30+ years of education. I've learned from you, felt supported by you, and felt our students and staff were in safe hands with you in our schools. So thank you for your great work and setting the standard for how meaningful and important an SRO can be for our school community. Best wishes in the next phase of life, hoping you're spending more time doing all the things that bring you joy.
Thank you, Meredith.
So also there's just a fun gift in here that the staff put together, so be sure to look inside the front cover. And we'd like to present that to you tonight, so thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So I don't know if any.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in and, I mean, you said it all pretty well, but you just have been an exemplar of what an SRO can do in a school and how it can be a force of positive change in a school. Thank you. I appreciate that. And just, you know, on a more personal level, both my kids had a great time having you around until they were in school. So thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
We appreciate you being here tonight. This has been tried to be scheduled for like a bad weather night, a board cancellation night. So we're glad that you could come tonight. So thank you.
Means a lot. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have organizational meeting officer. So first meeting since the election. The last meeting was, I guess it would have been during the election anyway. So it could be the first time we could do it. So we need a chair. I would be interested. Anybody else interested in chair?
I will make a motion for Brian Gill for chair.
I will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 401. Vice chair?
I think if you want me to continue to do it, I don't do much. If someone else wants to do it, they can do it too.
I make a motion to nominate Jake Eckert as vice chair.
I will second.
Discussion or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 401. Policy subcommittee, we need 2 board representatives. This is an open meeting. Anybody can attend. And we occasionally have had board members who want the official reps attend. That's always an option, but yeah, so we do need 2 official representatives. Last time around it was myself and Mark.
I'm happy to continue to do it. I'm also happy if somebody else wants to step in.
Yeah, likewise.
So I would make a motion for Brian Gill and Mark Brewer for policy subcommittee.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 302. Curriculum committee, somewhat similar. It's one of our published meetings. Anybody can attend, but we normally have 2 representatives. This is the second Thursday of the week at 3:30 p.m. That's pretty well established with staff, so I think that's fixed. So contemplate that. I think it's been Mark and was it Noah?
Yeah,
It's
although
changed around a
I've
bit.
only so far actually made one, because of scheduling conflicts.
Scheduling conflicts.
I mean, I think I figured out how to get into Asylum to schedule it, but I'm a little bit at the mercy of what course I need to sign. But I'm happy to keep trying. And getting scheduling figured out, but.
I think it's up to you. I've also been attending, so I'm happy to, if you don't want to do it, I'm happy to do it, but,
I'm happy to stay on too, but again, happy to let someone else do it.
Yeah, I would stay on.
okay, I would make a motion to have no attorney and Mark Brewer as the representatives to the curriculum committee.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 302. JPC, Joint Professional Development Committee. This is specified by the contract of the unions that there will be just a format for board, union, and administration to have exchange of ideas. Doesn't pass or adopt any actions. It's really a discussion forum in an informal setting. Jake and myself have been the reps for the past few years. Happy to continue, but happy to let somebody else do that too. Meets 4 times a year, it's 3:30. What's that?
I'm just saying if anybody else is interested, if not, I'm gonna make a motion.
Make a motion.
All right, I motion for Brian McGill and Jake Eckert to continue as the board reps on JPDC.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 302. UTC, United Technology Center. Kevin is currently the rep.
Happy to continue unless somebody wants
Of
to.
course he is, he wants that.
No, I was gonna say, you told it a little too well.
It's a lot of work, though. You don't want to do it, they're long meetings. Terrible weather.
I would make a motion, that Kevin O'Leary would be the RSU 26 representative to the Bangor UTC.
I will second it even though I'm hungry.
Thanks, Mark.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 401. Bruce, Jake has been our rep.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue to do it, or something to do it.
Can we remind you what's Bruce 10?
Yeah, it's Southern Penobscot Regional, Center for Children with Exceptional Needs.
For particular special needs that can't be handled in the district, it's a regional coalition to address some of those needs. I would make a motion to nominate Jake Eckert as the RSU 26 representative to Spruce. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 401. Building committee is a multi-stakeholder committee with staff and community, it was initially an ad hoc committee that was created when we started the construction process. I guess Meredith and I haven't talked about it, but I think a recommendation is it seems to continue to be a good sounding board to take certain kinds of questions there, and that we should probably continue it at least for now. Mark and I have been the representatives. Open to other people if somebody else is interested.
As am I, but I'm happy to stay too.
I'll make a motion for Brian McGill and Mark Brewer to the building.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 302. Wellness Committee is required by federal law. And has been up and down in terms of its level of activity, and I know it's been trying to breathe some life back into it again, which is great. Noah has been doing that. Do you want to continue on?
Sure.
Okay, I would make a motion to nominate no attorney as the lead on the Wellness Committee. So second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 401. Stipend Committee, that's another thing that's in the union contract. The committee meets a couple times a year to look at stipend levels and to evaluate overall stipend picture as well as approve specific stipend suggestions. I think you've done the rough take, is that right? Yeah, who's been doing that?
That was you.
I've never actually, you know who's the current stipend? It was Aaron for a while, and I'm not sure who's done it. I don't remember.
Stipend is Kevin.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Sorry.
Have we had meetings?
We have,
Oh, I've missed it, I'm sorry.
we've been carrying on.
In spite of my brilliant absence. When do those tend to occur?
Wednesdays, 4 or 5 times a year, like 3:30, 3:15 to 4:15.
If you may not want me to do this, I'm willing to try again.
They're well advertised in advance. Shauna maps them out in the summer. for
I've
the next
received
year.
emails, I just didn't know I was on, I was like, oh, all right, that's good to know. Stipend, I just, I forgot.
Fine, if you'd like to see a change up too.
I'll, to be fair, all I remember from being inducted to these things for the first time is being confused for 3 months. So I feel like I'm better prepared for what's about to happen in March and April and May. If I'm willing to do it, if people are okay with that, or other people can, I will do a better job of attending. It's up to you.
I will make a motion for Kevin Roberge to second.
And I will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 4-0. EI committee, another ad hoc committee that clearly still in the middle of things and probably should be continuing for a while. Kevin and I have been the representatives. I'm happy to continue that, okay. Anybody else?
I'll make a motion for Brian McGill and Kevin Rivera to be the board reps on the DEI committee.
I'll second it. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Passes 301. Any offices that we have missed? I think Meredith and I tried to catch them all, but anything that we're missing, anybody can think of? Read anything that we have not necessarily had that we should have? I mean, by and large, this board is preferred. We're already pretty small at 5 people and we're all, volunteer overloaded, not to have a finance committee or some of the other things that some boards have, but probably a good moment to just pause and see if there's anything we're missing right now. We prefer to do those kinds of things as the group of 5, really focusing on either interactions with stakeholders or nutty details like writing policies, other things we tend to put into state committees.
I'm sort of squeezing the outdoor stuff in as well.
I think that's a good fit if you're happy with that. Okay,
Good with everything.
yeah, we always can create something in the future if we see the need. She's the finance boss, committee, everything.
That's her.
Okay, I'm hearing contentment with the current status quo for the list of positions. We'll go ahead and move on to minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th as presented. Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Make a motion to approve regular warrants 18 and 19 payroll warrant 18 and 19, February, May 1st warrant, and ban warrants 34 and 35. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up, we come to public comment. Is there any public comment? I will just note Ed has stepped out, so if anybody had something for him, probably better to just email it to him. Any other public comment? Being none, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. So we already acknowledged Ed, but generic acknowledgements, anything, Dave?
No.
I know the spring sports are starting up as well as some spring drama activities, so thank you to the coaches and leaders of those. Anything, Kevin?
Yeah, I shout out to all the folks who put together the show choir, what was it called, extravaganza or awesomeness. We forget the exact title. It happened in the PAC and it involved the ASA show choir, it involved the OMS show choir, the high school show choir. And it was really cool to see kids as young as third grade all the way up to their senior year of high school performing these songs and the dance, and all the volunteers from the community, all the people who are a part of the school faculty, all working with these kids and their passions. And the high school one in particular was a real heartstring puller, really well put together, really deep pieces connected. It was a really great performance to go to. So really appreciate all the work that went in, all the different stakeholders that make that possible.
Anything, Kevin? Noah?
That's what I was gonna say. Oh, sorry. But not nearly as much. I wasn't really gonna. I'm glad. Thank you for saying.
Mark, anything?
Thank you.
Meredith?
Ed was the acknowledgement I planned for tonight. So.
Okay. Go ahead and move on to director reports. Lisa, you want to start?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I thought I'd give you a rundown on our current numbers. K through 12, we've got 229 active IEPs. We have 17 students currently in referral. It seems like I walk into a building or I walk into my office and somebody's handing me a new referral. 504s, we have 141 total with 7 referrals underway. Business is definitely booming. I think I've been told I have about 60 IEP meetings left for the remainder of the school year. So I guess the countdown for that's begun. That's kind of exciting. Another thing I wanted to bring up is thanks to Susan Smith. She put us in touch with Sarah Henry from the University of Maine. So Jill Conley's been in touch with Sarah, who is the Director of Student Accessibility Services at UMaine. And they're planning to have Sarah come join us at school to provide an informational talk with students about accommodations once they begin college. She'll open it up to a question and answer session. So Meredith D and Sam, you'll be hearing from Jill soon and how best to coordinate this during the school day. They're brainstorming the possibility of opening it up for an informational session for parents at some point in the future. So kind of excited about getting this going. This is part of the new EDIPs that staff are working on. So Jill's excited about putting this together. We also started our plans for summer programming. And at this point, we plan to run the 5 weeks beginning June 27th through July 27th. We have students that are receiving extended school year services. So K through 5, we're looking at about 20 kids right now. In 6 through 8, we're looking at 17. And at the high school, we have 8 students. And those are the kids who have services outlined in their IEP due to the summer slide that they experience and the amount of time it takes to recoup from those slides. We also have Summer Stars that'll be happening at ASA. I'm not sure how many students will be involved with that. We have about 20 students interested in the enrichment programs offered at the middle school, and definitely, especially folks who have students with high anxiety have already been asking us about, fifth graders moving up to sixth grade, and is there something for them to, allow them to make a connection over the summer. So, we're happy that we're able to offer that again this year. We also have about 20 still interested in participating in the enrichment in grades 9 through 11th. That doesn't count the possible math program where students will be allowed the opportunity to maybe regain some credit that they've lost. So lots of things happening for that. As far as I've got staff coming to me already saying they're interested in helping out and looking at where we're going to place everybody. Special Olympics, I thought I'd give you a little update. We've had bowling, we've had basketball. We actually had a unified team at the middle school that just started, so that was good. The next event that teams will be participating in will be bocce, and that will be at Maine Maritime Academy in Castine. We have 2 high school unified teams and 1 middle school unified team attending, and each unified team consists of 2 athletes and 2 unified partners. Athletes will be working on some of the gross motor skills and muscle memory tasks needed for participating in bocce during their adaptive physical education class to prepare for the games. And the kids are having fun. They always come back with great stories and great photos with big smiles. So we're happy to have them participating in that. After bocce, they'll be participating in spring track on May 17th, and there's a variety of events that our athletes will be competing in individually, as well as I think a unified relay option that we hope to set up some teams for. Lastly, one of our contracted speech language pathologists is beginning her maternity leave early. So a couple weeks early. She's actually beginning tomorrow. And we were on the hunt, probably for the last 2 months to try to find somebody to fill in for those services. And we were having a hard time finding somebody to fill in person. I was thinking I was going to have to go with virtual services, and I know not everybody has had a good experience with that. I had a contract ready to go, and then I got a call from a local contractor that we are able to get some of our occupational therapy services for, and she said she had just had a therapist become available for us. So I think there might be a small delay because we didn't expect this to begin till mid-April, but I don't think the kids will be going out with the services for too long. So we're pretty pleased with that. Any questions?
Any questions? Nope, thank you, Lisa.
Is that the only speech therapist we have right now, or
No, we have 3. We have 2 that are on staff, and then we have 1 that's a contracted provider.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Susan?
Yeah, good evening. I think I'll start by sharing that the trail that connected Jill to Sarah Henry at the University of Maine actually started with Maddie West to me, to Lisa, to Jill. So one of the things so thanks, Maddie. One of the things I really like about the Director of Learning position is when I'm able to help match up resources and needs. It's an exciting part of the position, I think, and I enjoy doing that. So lots of things were happening in the world of professional development, curriculum work, and as well as the DEI work last month and this month. It's a nice time period to get lots of work done. Our March 17th Professional Development Day, we had 61 staff members respond to the survey about that day, and overall the format of the day was really well received. I think people liked having the choices in the afternoon And the choices that were most attended were navigating within and facilitating diverse conversations, the Dawnland movie about Native Americans and their removal from their families, as well as the Penobscot River, her importance and her health, and how the Penobscot Indian Nation uses the river was another big hit. And then All About You and Shuffleboard. So those were the sessions that people chose to attend, and the afternoon sessions were very well received. The feedback from that was really positive. I'd also like to thank Sam, Heidi, and Kim for bringing some fun into the day with some games. Lots of people commented how they enjoyed being all together for a part of the day, the morning, and having some fun together too. So, and then Superintendent Higgins gets the gold star for tracking down Sherbert, and she really worked hard to make sure that we had a special snack, and people really appreciated that too. So in addition to the professional development around culturally competent curriculum and looking at some samples, using some rubrics, there was a nice variety of activities that day. So about half of the afternoon sessions were hosted by our local RSU 26 folks, and the other half were from people from outside of our district. April 12th is our next early release day, and that will be spent on getting ready for the NWEAs, different testing format for our students in grades through 8 and grade 10 this school year. That will make things just a little bit different than what we're used to, but we'll be ready for that when that testing window opens up in May. And working on curriculum, I met with the OHS math folks today. They have found a way to work together during a study hall time, and it's been really nice to capture an hour every other day, or just about an hour every other day, to work with them for the month of from now until the end of April. Yeah, DEI meetings coming up on Thursday.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, we'll move on to superintendent report.
Well, I'd like to just acknowledge Susan's work in putting together the PD Day on March 17th. It was really a day that accomplished a lot of objectives for us as a district and moved our work forward on DEI in a prominent way. And it took a lot of coordination to offer all those options for staff. So thank you, Susan, for your work on that. Well done. I want to follow up with some circling back to some previous conversations. I don't know that we've had it in the format of a board, but I've had conversations with a couple of you about a piano for the fact. I'm pleased to let you know that we have closed the deal on a piano. It's actually the piano we looked at last summer, and we couldn't come to an agreement on price. Had an opportunity to get the piano for what we had offered last summer, and so we're arranging for that to be moved and should be on site hopefully for all the spring performances. I'm not sure it's going to make it here in time for the ASA one this week after next, but for sure the ones after that. So it's a Yamaha C3 grand piano. So really pleased to get that. And the person that's been in care of that since the owner left the area is the same person who tunes our pianos, and so we feel like it's been vetted really well. Also came on referral from Laura Donnie University, so some trusted referrals that this is a good piece for us to acquire.
Where's it coming from?
Bangor.
Okay.
Yeah, the individual didn't live in Bangor per se, it lived in the area, but it's been with the Brian Cattell, who tunes all the pianos. He's been holding on to it while it was kind of turned and sold. So that's a good update. Another update, excited for this teacher, sad for us. We have a retirement to announce that was actually, it was going to be a little later, but now it's been decided it's going to be a little early. It's going to be at the end of the school year. Tammy Sear, a longtime teacher in the district, has taught special education in the district, is going to retire at the end of the year. So we wish Tammy the best and for her retirement. And we'll talk a little bit about that in budget though, because that's news that just came in this afternoon. So maybe something that I can update you on that in the budget picture. Also want to just talk a little bit about a request that's come to us from the VZ School Department. Those of you who've been on the board for a time know this probably, for others it may be new information, but when we were in RSU with Glenburn and VZ, when that disbanded, we had written up withdrawal agreements that we had to agree to with each district, and they were, you know, there were negotiations of how the separation would occur, and it touched on lots of areas, you know, financial, staffing, you know, consolidated services that had to be deconsolidated. And one of them was about high school education. And basically in both of those agreements, Orono High School was agreeing to accept their students as high school students, if that student wanted to attend here. There were a few other kind of nuances to that, but that's kind of the bottom line, that those communities that don't have high schools with this agreement had a guarantee place that they knew their students could go to school for high school. Those agreements are lapsing as of the end of this school year. They expire in I think June of 2023. So they were 10-year agreements. VZ's reached out to us and would like to establish a high school, you know, attendance agreement that is in the same fashion. It still offers school choice for those communities as the agreements did, but offers, you know, Orono High School as the place that would guarantee enrollment for one of their, for all of their students. This holds some advantages for us, i.e., you know, things like bus transportation can be stipulated as part of the agreement, and it helps us get more students for those communities if, you know, that community is sponsoring the bus transportation. So not all communities that we have students coming from pay for transportation from bus transportation from those communities, but for VZ and Glenburn, that is true, and it's in the withdrawal agreements.
So right now they are providing.
Yes, yeah, that was in the withdrawal agreements before. So VZ's approached us and would like us to renew basically just a high school enrollment kind of stipulation, that part of the agreement only. The agreement that we've had is much larger, so all of those pieces will fall away. That was about debt service and all of those pieces. So I met with the superintendent VZ, and we put together what we think might be the kind of agreement we both think makes sense. And we've asked the attorney at Drummond and Woodson to look at it. And I planned on bringing this to you once they'd looked at it, but because I got some initial feedback that I was surprised by, I wanted to run it by you sooner. Apparently, for us to enter into this agreement, it has to be approved by the voters, not just the board of directors. And you can do that through a budget meeting. Like we could add, you know, something in our warrant articles. I presume, I don't know if it can be in the warrant articles or if it would be like a separate vote at the meeting. We get those details. So it's good timing, right, for us to plan for that. But I just wanted to kind of take the pulse to see if this is something that you think, you know, makes sense. And if so, I think I'll also reach out to Glenburn to see if they want to do the same thing, so we could plan to do both of them at the May meeting.
Other than the transportation, what's the other advantage of it?
I think it just signals like a close working relationship between the districts, and I think it helps, you know, funnel more students here.
Do you think it does?
I think it does to a
I don't
certain
know,
degree.
that's why I'm asking. And so listen, as I think of this, like I see much more upside for the communities that we would enter into an agreement with for them, because they have a guaranteed place to send their high school students, but yet their high school students can go where they want.
Right,
So, you know, that's a huge win for communities.
yeah.
I
would say for us, it doesn't cost us anything really. Because if there are additional services, we can bill for those extra services, like all the special education services we bill for those that are above the regular tuition rate. And honestly, transportation is a barrier for students to be able to attend high school. And for example, in VZ, Bangor pays for a bus to go to VZ, to pick up students to go to Bangor High, so they're putting out, you know, the resource to draw students in, whereas with this, that cost is on VZ for students to be able to come here.
Do you know roughly what percentage of these equivalent students we've gotten over the last 10 years?
We've been talking a lot about this because we've been talking about our enrollment study and how to forecast, and I guess I haven't looked at those communities separate. But we were just talking about Glenburn today, because, you know, 26% is the rate of that our enrollment study said we get from sending communities on average. Like 26% of their, you know, eligible students each year. But that's on average
So I'm
for the
sorry, like
whole.
26% of easy, 22%.
Well, I mean, it's probably,
In the study.
yeah, in the study, it was on average, 26% is what you can count on each year. We'd have to look a little closer because there are definite swings in, size of classes from there. So in my head, it's hard for me to gauge percentages because some years there's a larger group, like this year, it's a pretty big group for VZ this year, and other years it's quite small. So it just depends on the year.
So why is it good for us to get those students? Are they financially, are they paying when they're sending to us?
Right.
Right, so.
Well, it's good for a couple of reasons. I think the biggest reason our high school wants to have a certain population to augment our tuition population, to augment our resident population, is to allow breadth of programming that I think this community values and wants in their high school. But it would be hard for us to have the kind of broad programming with just our resident population and therefore subsidy. So we rely on that tuition subsidy to really be able to diversify programming and offer, you know, all the courses and programs we offer. That's probably the biggest reason. And the other is just, you know, it revenue helps us, overall revenue. You know, when we look at that line, that's a pretty important line for us to offset local tax expenditure. You know, and I think that when we have big tuition enrollment years, it really eases kind of the local tax burden for us in terms of what our local tax increases might be.
And if we didn't have this agreement, they might still send us students. How's the?
Students could still choose to attend here, and we would get the same tuition rate. We just wouldn't have busing basically, and wouldn't have, you know, as probably closer relationship in terms of placing students with the district as we might otherwise. I would say, you know, we have a long history with VZ. We used to be in a school, what was called a school union with VZ, where we shared central services. They had the same superintendent and central office staff as we did, and we did a lot together as a district, had some shared staff even. And so I think VZ values the partnership with Orono. That's been a longstanding partnership and really hopes to be able to.
They did during the withdrawal.
Well,
That's a
I
good
think
point.
that was,
Yeah. I
So
mean,
there were some people there who clearly did not value that.
well, I can tell you that the superintendent reported their board is really, you know, their current board really values, you know, the relationship and hopes to be able to maintain us as a, you know, high school partner for the district, but they don't want to give up school choice.
right, I mean, I guess I have a little more of a kind of business assessment of this, that, right, guaranteeing to take every one of their students that can't. The point about that is that these are the students who might not be accepted by other districts, right? It could be the extreme behavioral challenge, it could be the kid that got expelled for bringing a gun to school and that, you know, has come back after a year of time, and that's the only thing the guarantee is doing for them. They still have school choice, and I agree, they're never going to give up school choice. That's the reason people move to VZ instead of Orono, is the ones that like school choice, but so that's not a negotiation that's on the table, but I do see it as having a potential cost to us. guarantee is a strong thing to take any student. There's a very broad range of students out there, and the ones who are straight A students and star quarterbacks and, you know, leading, various, student clubs, you know, all are going to be accepted at Bangor or, you know, any other district. So we really have to think through the students we're guaranteeing to take, and I really, you know, we do have a history of easy. I'm willing to contemplate it, but I want to know what we're getting back for it. And I learned tonight that we're getting, you know, we're saving transportation costs, where Bangor's paying transportation costs. As far as I understand it, for example, with Glenburn, they're paying transportation costs to both Orono and Bangor, so there's really no preferential value
Right.
at all, in the relationship with, Glenburn, and of course we have other sending towns too, but I think those are the two biggest ones. So to me, it's a business transaction. We're signing a contract to take the worst student, right, or the student that nobody else wants. You know, and that's terrible language to use about students, but,
So correct.
why?
Do we, I mean, I'm new here. What is our, what information, I'm sure we have it about, these students in terms of.
But I'm not saying that's necessarily the situation
Oh,
today. You know, I'm thrilled to have the students from BZ. It's not a critique of BZ.
Correct me if I'm
But the
wrong.
nature of the contract is they have to have a guarantee that they can find a home for every student. Right? And 99.9% of the students, it's no problem because they bring tuition dollars with them, and Bangor is happy to have them. They're happy enough to have them. If they're paying transportation, we're happy to have them. Brewer's happy to have them. But the whole point of why they have to have a guarantee is for that challenging case. And we're not, you know, if we didn't sign this contract, and we went off to sign a contract with Brewer, they're not gonna give up school choice. Their students are still not gonna have a choice to come to Orono. Just, you know, that extreme boundary case that, we're not on the hook for and somebody else is on the hook for.
So like, what percentage, like, from other towns of students do we like not admit, or what is the?
No, I can think of one student across both of the districts that we have these arrangements for over the 6 years I've been here. That we invoke you have to get a refusal from every district that is an option for you until we take you.
I mean,
So that's the language of the contract. That students are guaranteed enrollment. But if we wish to refuse enrollment, they have to seek to be enrolled, and it usually lists the other, and it's the area schools, you know, like Bangor, Brewer.
Do we have this contract with every, almost in others?
No, we just have it with Glenburn and BZ right now.
Like with other schools, like other districts, do they send students and we don't?
so I guess, can I?
We do. It's,
No, I think maybe,
I was trying to explain it.
no, I think to go back even a little bit further, I don't know if maybe they understand, like, so if you live in a town in Maine that does not have a high school, you have school choice. You can send your kid to any high school you want.
If you're not part of an RSU.
Correct, right. So these two districts were part of our RSU back about 10 years ago. So their students automatically came to our high school. They chose to leave us. And now, kind of the way I look at it is they want to guarantee that they'll still have a high school to go to, despite the fact they had that and chose to leave it.
Right. I mean, and they got a tenure, I mean, probably you too. I remember it was a pretty competitive split, and a lot of people were unhappy that they got the tenure guarantee, but it was part of the terms of splitting. And at this point in time, you know, yes, it's a small probability circumstance, right? 99.9% of the students, it's not an issue, and I'm not trying to, last thing I want to do is start saying we're gonna pick and choose students and, you know, take a certain kind of student. I don't even know what kind of student that would be. But there are students out there that bring severe problems with them. I remember a case, you know, I cited the example of a gun, and it wasn't one of those two sending towns, but there was a debate in Orono about whether we'd accept the student because they'd been expelled from another district who had brought a gun to school, right? So that's it's a little bit of a hypothetical because it wasn't Glenburn and BZ and we didn't have to take them, but it was a debate about whether it was a student from out of Orono about whether we wanted to take that student. So we're gonna sign a contract that guarantees to take any student for 10 years, we think through what that looks like. And what we get in return, and, I don't know, it's a conversation, but getting guaranteed busing, maybe that's at least a tangible return that I can see.
And at the end of the day, it's the student and their family who choose what high school they get to go to. They don't have to come here. They're just guaranteed that they'll have a spot here if they can't go anywhere else.
Right.
And are we required to do busing otherwise, or
No,
No,
so,
only for or no residents.
okay, so no.
it's the sending district that has responsibility
So,
for transportation and for paying for where they choose to go.
so basically, it's like a incentive for them to send here. Wait, for this.
They don't have to provide high school transportation for their
And the community
students.
do not have, it becomes the parent's responsibility of the kids.
Because it becomes like,
So that's the advantage for us, is that VZ is transporting door to door, door to school, transporting students here who choose to attend here, and they don't do that for any other district.
so
John Batch does it to get VZ students, and Bangor does it to get VZ students.
with, it becomes an incentive to the family, they don't have to transport, so it makes it more attractive for them to choose here with the bus.
Well,
Although,
except they have, but
Right.
it's more about which district
Pays for it.
who pays for it. It's more about, whatever it is, 10,000, 50,000 out of our pocket to pay for it, because if you're a parent in VZ, Bangor will bus your kid, John Bass will bus your kid, and your kid will get bused for, and it just so happens that VZ taxpayers are paying for it instead of John Bass tax. Or parents are,
so they get us here either way, if they chose here, we didn't have the contract. Easy student chose to come here,
There would be no busing unless we arranged it and paid for it.
right, so in that situation, the incentive for parents to choose to go elsewhere. Because there's not an automatic bus.
Correct.
So, and how, I guess that's the question, like, what is this cost? How much is busing for those handful of students? Do we have that?
It would, I am just guessing right now. I'm thinking it would be probably 50,000, I'd guess.
and we get ballpark 10,000 per student who comes. That's tuition. And tuition, yeah,
The 12, it's
12, it's up to 12 now,
12 or 13. 12.
yeah, 12 November. But, you know, so 4 kids would pay for the bus, but that's 4 kids we're not having to pay for. That's 50,000 of busing we're not having to pay for easy right now.
I mean, VZ's numbers are small. We don't, I mean, we get more students from Glenburn than VZ.
Yeah.
Wait, how many students are we thinking, like, we're talking about, like, 26% of, like.
I don't have all the data to share with you. I'm happy to,
So I mean, it can be a significant number of kids coming from Glenburn, and BZ school is incredibly small, we're talking very small. I mean,
Class sizes.
single
I
points,
think they
right?
well, it's like 16 this year.
Right, and but that's an abnormally large group.
Yeah, it's a little larger, like they have 19 the next year. So, but sometimes they're 9 or 8. I think typically it's more like 12. 13.
Yeah, I'm always thrilled to get tuition students, you know, it's one of the things that I always kind of harp on is, you know, how are we doing in recruiting, because for the reasons that Meredith just said, you know, these tuition students allow us to lower taxes, and provide more programming, you know, co and extracurricular is important, we couldn't do it if we didn't have additional
And-
students
yeah.
beyond Orem. So
And
that's
academic.
incredibly important. That being said, I am and have been uncomfortable with the contract that locks us into an obligation, right, to take these kids. And so my knee-jerk reaction would be to continue to do all we can to recruit and welcome students from not only Glenwood and BZ, but from any sending communities. You know, we're happy to bring these tuition students in and have them be part of Orono High School, but avoid the contractual obligation that we're required to do that. That being said, if you, Meredith, think that it's to our advantage to continue, I would almost certainly reserve the right to change my mind. Probably not. I'm willing to defer to you on that. But I'm not, I don't, just off kind of knee-jerk reaction, I don't love being in that contractual obligation, right? I mean, the reason that we're in there right now is because we were forced to do it as part of the dissolution of the RSU, right? And that was part of the condition of getting out of what everybody, I think, at that time thought was something we needed to get out of. I'll go on my rant about school choice in general, because it's not the place for it, but I think it's ridiculous how we do this as a state. It's stupid. And then it should be fixed. And we tried to fix it, and we actually made it worse, because the policy was terrible. And it causes all kinds of problems, right? I mean, it causes a problem, for example, with the bond we just took out, right? Tuition didn't go up because of the bond, right? So the RNO taxpayers had to foot the bill for that. Whereas if you were a tuition paying parent, you didn't. There wasn't like an extra surcharge for bond. So I mean, I don't like the whole sending community school choice thing.
That's something we could propose.
Terrible, right? I think that's horrible. But anyway, that being said, the small picture right now, I personally would not. I'm not super supportive of these agreements, but if you think that it's to our benefit to renew these agreements, I'd be supportive of that. Maybe 10 years might be a little bit of a long window. Maybe we do it for a smaller number of years. No, we're not going to do 10. We'll do 3. We'll do 5. But I guess that's where I stand.
Are they required to have a last resort or guaranteed provider? Is this something they have to have?
I think they are.
They might be too.
Like, I think Milford is connected with Old Town in that way.
So, 2 questions. Would there be an application process? I don't know how it works. And if we decided to not have this contractual agreement with Glenburn and VZ, are, folks, so folks on the board and Meredith who might be concerned about having a contractual agreement, how do we feel about, say, providing busing to VZ and Glenburn to sort of compete with these other schools like Bangor and John Baptist for the students that are accepted if we go if there's an application, if we go to the application process?
To Meredith's point, the advantage to us is that we won't have to pay for the bus if we enter into an agreement with they'll provide it.
I kind of got lost in what the first
Right.
question was.
I guess I'll bring it to 2. Would there be an application process?
To apply to come here?
Yeah, if we weren't the last resort school.
Well, I mean, students just submit enrollment paperwork. I mean, that kind of is already a process.
Okay.
I mean, for practice, we're usually competing for their students, and every time one more application comes to us, instead of going to John Baptist or Bangor, we're like, yeah, that's another 12,000.
Oh, okay, so it's just a matter of reserving the right to say, not that one,
Right.
in the extreme case that you're describing, for example.
Yeah.
In the case that we don't have a contractual agreement, is there interest in providing a bus as we do now to be competitive? It sounds like Bangor and Baptist are already providing a bus, even though they don't have an agreement, in order to provide convenience.
From what I understand, Bangor provides, like, pick up at 3 or 4 different spots around town. So it's not door to door, which is a little prohibitive, especially in winter. It's, easy.
These are spread out.
It is kind of spread out. So I'm not exactly sure what that pickup arrangement is. I mean, that would be a question for us financially. I mean, that it would be hard, I would say. What Glenburn runs theirs differently, and that's a whole nother conversation, about how they do their busing. I think it would cost less for Glenburn bus, the way they do it. They pick up all their kids, they all go to Bangor, and then they get on one bus that comes to, one bus comes to Orono, one bus goes to Bangor, one bus goes to Herman. But Glenburn does all the door-to-door pickup, and then they all converge at this hub, and then they get on their high school bus to come here. Whereas VZ, they do door-to-door pickup, and then I'll go to the VZ school and get on the bus to come here. So VZ would cost us more, because Glenburn, I think all we would have to pay is a bus from the Bangor hub to here. I believe that's all they would charge us. If they would charge us. They haven't approached us, so they do not, I haven't talked with them. I mean, I do see the downside. We haven't had that happen yet. And I generally take a very open stance to enrollment. I think all kids have a right to public education, and I hate to, turn students away. Even, students that aren't in our community, I generally think we serve all kids really well. But I know that sometimes there's a resource strain that we can't really take on always, or a safety issue in the one example you cited. And as I said, there's been one student who we said we're not going to accept them. They need to go and seek enrollment in all these other places and demonstrate that they were not able to get in. They didn't end up coming to us when we asked for that. So, but it could happen, right? I do think there is an advantage that helps us with our enrollment and with high school programming. I mean, you look at our class sizes, you look at our breadth of programming. That's not possible without our strong tuition numbers. And I would say that also if we say no, I think there will be a cause. There will be some bad feelings. So I don't know that it would be with all the families, but certainly with the organization, there would probably be some bad feelings from the community.
If we do say no, like what happens to those, what would happen to those students that, like, they can't get, or like, would they, if they can't get into high school, like?
I don't know what,
Well, I believe.
that's not really our
I guess, well, I guess
issue.
that's what I'm,
Well, to answer your question, I think if we say no, they have to go find an agreement
Yeah,
with some others.
have to go somewhere else.
they have to have an agreement with some.
I think they do. Yes, I haven't looked into this because I don't have a school.
I guess I was trying to see if
so.
there was some way to like have their cake and eat it too, which is like kind of like have like LMSers right out for extreme situations.
Well-
It sounds like, no.
I mean, so I think the bad blood or hurt feelings or whatever is real, but in a theoretical world, 10 years down the road, we could be Bangor could be the school of last resort, and they could still have kids coming here all the time because they like their arts programs or sports programs or AP programs, whatever they are. Right, it's just the issue of the busing that differentiates that at that point. That's, I mean, not to start Mark on his rant again, but that's the set of weird incentives in the town to having school choice is that they're the ones that get to have their cake and eat it too. We're the ones who sit here and pay bonds on buildings and have a hard conversation about capital maintenance. And the tuition we can charge is fixed. So whatever we decide tonight, he's just gonna pay the same amount to come here. And so, anyway, it's a complicated situation. I mean, I guess I'd be interested in just exploring with them what else they could put on the table besides the bus, not forget about nothing. And I also, we've gone back and forth, but like you said, even before the RSU, we were in an AOS and shared some superintendent. I don't think they're in that place. We also shared some special ed supervision. I almost wonder, if this would be a case where a little deepening of the relationship might make me feel better about it, as opposed to that being the only thing that's coming from BZ. That's just off the cuff. I don't really feel like the board put an end to sharing the sped director because we felt like there was enough to do here.
And there still is.
So, yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that, but anyway. I don't have a final opinion on this, but it's not black and white. There's a cost to us, and it's not clear how much we're getting for it, so.
I think it was naive of me to think that it wasn't opening up a.
You step into the 10-year-old history that you weren't here for, so.
Yes, so I'll bring back some numbers too, because you're asking for some enrollment data that I don't have on at my fingertips right now. And circle back and talk further with the superintendent there about other incentives that. I mean, I'm interested in maybe thinking about a debt service, kind of calculation that we maybe could apply per student.
Sam, I've seen you have expressions a couple times. Don't want to put you on the spot, but Sam or Meredith, you're welcome to jump in if you want.
I mean, I've just been listening in and I think the points you guys are making is valid. I will say I for the past 9 years, I've been the person that when our students choose to enroll in 9th grade, we just enroll them. So as they're coming in, 8th graders into 9th grade, we enroll them when they pass in their packets. But students that want to come in at different times within their high school career go through a pre-registration process that I'm responsible for. And which allows me to ask questions of the student and the family as to why they want to transfer, allows me to ask the school about the history of the student at the previous school, really gives me a lot of information. But I will say, as far as 8th and 9th, I do agree with what Meredith Higgins said, as far as the relationships are really key. Over the years here, we've worked hard to establish relationships with our sending towns, and really be a school that they want to send their students to, and they encourage their students to attend, and they see the bonuses that we have, which one of them is that we're a small school that offers a lot. And we give our kids a full range of activities and possibilities throughout their high school career. And that is in large part because we have the student body we have. So I do agree with a lot of the points you guys were making. I hear the concerns though too, but I have yet to have, other than that, I think I know that one student Meredith is mentioning. Other than that, this agreement hasn't been a difficulty at all in my experiences with students coming to Orono High School.
Thank you.
And I'll just echo what Meredith and Sam have said. I think that students are able to access at Orono a caring and empathetic and student-centered approach to a high school education that is just not available at other schools in this region. And when we talk about wanting kids to feel seen and heard and understood, every student feeling like they are an important part of our community, that is also an experience I think that we are uniquely positioned to offer. The faculty at Orono is top of students lists again and again and again when we talk about why students choose to come here, because of the way in which they feel cared for and supported by their faculty. And I think that I have really appreciated Meredith's open door approach to enrollment, right? And the idea that every student deserves to have this kind of an experience in high school. And I would hate to see that be something that we make less accessible to students. And I know that's not what the board is saying, but that may be the message that districts hear if this were to change.
So we'll put this on the agenda next time and have some more information to talk. And I'll probably reach out to Glimmer just to make sure that, I know their intentions, whether they're interested in talking or not. The last thing is I want to let you know that Jason brought to me a request that we look at switching our phone provider. We currently are with a provider that was obtained, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago through, an open bid, and the next year did our Wi-Fi upgrade. And we've had some real challenges because the company is not local, not even in state. They're out of Tennessee. And so customer service has really been a big challenge for us. And we, at this point, can exit that part of the contract. We still will remain with the company for Wi-Fi for at least 1 more year if it's on the contract. So Jason went out and got some bids for other options, including that one. And we found a local option that we'd like to go with. The threshold for the contract is not an amount that under our policy requires board, like a formal process with purchasing. So it's really just notifying you that, Jason and I are gonna execute this change, and we get to reuse our equipment the extent to which it lasts. Some of them are in better shape than others, but we're actually going to save money overall and feel like we're going to have better customer service with this company that's able to be more responsive to customer service needs. So
Does this new company also offer Wi-Fi in the event that we can switch in a year?
Do you know that answer, Bill?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a company that I've used in the past.
Yeah,
I know them very well, and they can actually step in and take the whole realm over.
yeah, I think there was one of the other three companies that did not provide Wi-Fi as an option, but this one is not.
Great.
And that's all I had to bring to you in my report tonight.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
On to capital improvement plan update.
We put an updated copy of the capital improvement listing in the board folder in the materials for tonight. It looks a lot like the listing we gave you before, but there have been some adjustments to the list. We've added some items, taken off an item or so, just with things that changed. Updated some pricing, updated some priority designations. As you recall, we had the priority 1 through 4 rating system for infrastructure, and then the priority A through C for more like classroom space upgrade renovations. So the document looks like this. And then we have a lot of, yeah, looks like that. So we took this to, after our last meeting, we took this to the building committee, had that committee take a look at it, weigh in on the priority rankings specifically, and also weigh in on you know, whether items were missing, or, you know, if this seemed like a complete list. We got some really good input from that group, added a few things as a result of feedback there, and made some slight tweaks to the priorities that were developed. And some of the conversation also was thinking about priorities within the priorities, right? So like if you look at priority 3, that's a long list, right? So some comments like, well, in priority 3, this one feels like, you know, a higher one. I didn't reflect that on here. I have that kind of archived in our notes from the meeting, because we haven't taken the step yet of prioritizing within each section. And I guess the other thing to bring you is, well, no, down at the bottom, you see the, there are 3 items that we've tagged for 2023. The OHS gym roof, the ASA right rear of school, which is kind of the 3rd, 4th grade wing section roof, and then increasing the control panel so we can have more of the auto lock, unlock doors, exterior doors. And then we had to go ahead and replace the side steps at the middle school. Do that this year, so that's been taken off the list as already completed. So, you know, what we bring you tonight is really consideration of this list in terms of, you know, maybe accepting this for now as what we're working toward as a 10-year plan, but also in budget considerations tonight as to how much we're going to, if we're going to put more money toward accomplishing this plan beginning, you know, with next year's budget. And to consider, you know, with that, how we fund this over, presumably this is set up as a 10-year plan. Brian and Bill have been right alongside to lead this work. So do you have anything to add to that context?
I just add, this is a living document, right? If we looked at this 6 months from now, it's not like we're gonna cross off the top 4 items and everything else is exactly the same. Things are gonna go up and down with priorities as leaks, spring roofs and things. So the living document, probably at the board level, you know, the big thing to take is, you know, maybe that trade-off between infrastructure and classroom down at the bottom of the 2nd page. More infrastructure than classroom upgrades, but classrooms are getting along in the tooth too, and there's real money to spend on classroom upgrades. And, you know, the total number, 5.4 million, which again, in the context of a living document, that's not a guaranteed number for the next 10 years. That's a guesstimate, but, You divide that by 10, that's looking like $540,000 a year that we need to be spending to keep up with the buildings and the true sense of keeping up with the buildings. So that's, to me, that's the key number for the board that really rolls into, recognizing that there's been a long process. Bill's gotten a lot of information, he's been through the facilities committee. But that, 5.4 million over 10 years. And we'll talk when we get to the board survey. I know some people feel like, well, that's just because you let the school run down, and there's some truth to that, and there's not some truth to that, but let's not get ourselves, when you have these many square feet, I forget what our total square footage is, that's never gonna be free. It's never gonna be a couple $100,000. Maintaining school buildings just costs money. So we're just trying to get an honest, number on how much it's gonna cost to keep these things going forward. Assuming status quo, and we're not gonna double in size and number of students or something like that. This is a status quo kind of number about going forward. And no way to parse that out about how much of that should have been done a while ago and is deferred maintenance, and how much of that is just ongoing maintenance, right? Painting classrooms was something ongoing maintenance. So I don't know how to parse that into what could have been done and just regular maintenance, but for sure there's a big piece of that that's just regular maintenance going forward too. Total history, when I came on the board about the same time, a year after, I think, Jake, and when Mark came on the board, we were spending $80,000 a year on maintenance, and we pushed it up to 120, and then more recently, with Meredith, we pushed it up to 200, and we've been talking 250, and we started putting money. So anyway, it's been a long journey, but this is the first time, to my knowledge, we've actually sat down and said, instead of saying how much can we spend, let's ask how much we actually need to spend. There's still a gap to close, which is gonna be the next conversation. It's not gonna be a fun conversation, but at least we actually have a number about how much we need to spend to keep our buildings up to date.
This is not huge year to year, but in these conversations where there are projections about, assuming ordinary inflation over the next 10 years, then the 550 some odd thousand a year, that won't be constant, right? It'll be like $750,000 by the 10th year.
Yeah.
How do we avoid kind of, having that gap sneak up on us over time?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we're talking about 540,000 as something for next year. We did know that that's 540,000 plus construction inflation the year after that. 530,000 plus 2 years of construction inflation the year after that. Right, I think that's part of how we got into this, is put a set number for maintenance, and you let that whittle down as the rest of the budget grows. So I think you're right. If there's a real commitment, that needs to be a commitment that carries through inflation.
And I think that's part of why it has to be a living document, that we have to constantly, do an annual update. Where are we on these prices? Do these still, seem accurate, and then adjust accordingly to be able to, keep moving forward on a realistic pace. Because not just inflation, but, the list will grow, right? New things will emerge, or they'll just begin to look different. What was going to be able to just be a refresh now becomes maybe a more complete renovation because of just something changed.
And you're also, you gotta remember, you're looking at possibly a 10-year plan here, right? So the newer buildings we've got, you're gonna be at that point, you're gonna be 10 to 12 years. So now you're gonna have to start looking at them and different things that might be coming up as well. So it's just a constant.
I mean, and the other thing to remember is this is assuming that there's some sort of state funding to let us do something with middle school, right? I mean, we'll get to the board survey, that came out pretty clearly, that the middle school is getting more and more in need. And so, the worst case scenario is that state funding never comes through for the middle school, and that this number, that's not in here. That's an important qualification on this.
I mean, there's some things that we feel are emergent in here for the middle school: roofs.
Yeah. Roof, stairs.
Yeah.
Walls.
But that is a big question mark.
Can I ask a question about the middle school? So if there were to be money available, right, and we applied and we got some, since this is a shared space, could we use those funds for the library renovation or because I guess it technically is located in the high school? Or would we not be able to, or do we not know the answer to that?
I don't think we know the exact answer to that. I think, there would probably be some negotiation around some shared space. Because like we wouldn't need anything for the cafeteria, the
Right.
cafeteria is really new. So I think that's something that would be a part of talk discussion.
When did we find out about that?
There's no money right now, so.
Yeah, we have, I mean, there's not even an application
No,
out,
like, what is the time, like, if we think somebody's gonna happen?
10 years out. 10 years out, there'll probably be another application cycle in a couple of years. And that takes, if you get in the list, it could be, like 10 years before you get your school. I mean, that's like the worst case scenario if you get on the list probably. Because the people who are on the list who didn't get to this time, I think have to go back into consideration when the next cycle hits. And they only got through like, I want to say 8 projects or 6 or 8 projects.
It's definitely less than that.
And there were, I want to say 100 on the list.
I would say though, I mean, it does sound like if we presented a middle school only project that we would be in relatively good position, not a guarantee by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination. But yeah, and your point is well made. There's gonna come a point where we just can't keep waiting for that, right? I mean, the middle school is our oldest, it's our oldest building. It's got the least amount of attention in part because we are hoping that there's going to be funds available to do this, but we can, the clock's ticking, right? If we don't get those, then we're gonna have to do something. And Brian's point is also good, but if it gets to the point where we need to do that, this bill increases dramatically.
Yeah.
Right? More than doubles at least.
The other, I mean, there will be other opportunities for state revolving renovation funds. We didn't ask for really much at all from the middle school, so we could get some of that to help with some of the emergent needs. When that opportunity comes out, which I think it will come out in a year or so down the road, we're well poised to submit, lots of applications for, like I would submit $1 million worth of applications for the middle school next time probably, because there's $1 million cap every 5 years. And we have a little left in the high school too. So we have good lists now to work from to apply for that. That would be another opportunity for helping reduce some of the local impact of this list. We're capped out at ASA until we reach our 5 years. And we're almost capped out at the high school, but again, in 5 years, we'll have an opportunity to reset and try again. So I think maybe the conversation segues into the budget.
Yeah.
Unless you have more questions about this. I know, Mark, you emailed some feedback that, you have some other thoughts about priorities. I don't know if we want to talk about that now, or if we want to talk about budget. and how that intersects.
We should do it another night when we don't have some other things on the agenda, since none of it can happen in the next 6 months. Somebody who wants to dive into the nuts and bolts of this tonight?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, we already have a plan to do those 2 roof projects. If we're going to allocate more to this, we would want to line, like, in the form of especially another roofing project or a paving project, that we would want to probably get that lined up for the summer if possible. So, but I think we need to have the budget conversation first and then we can circle back to this.
Where we have to pave a road that the general public uses all the time. That's my favorite. I love
Talking
it.
about Goodrich
I
Drive.
love that. That's just absolutely.
So. Shall we move to budget?
Very good.
Sure.
Do you have other questions, Kevin?
No, I think my questions are just budget oriented.
Yeah,
In terms of making sure that, like we were saying earlier, that we don't do the bare minimum now and then inflation just swamps it and we end up, $500,000, $1 million short because we planned for 2023 and then it's 2033. But And my initial thought is when we start talking about the capital improvement part of the budget, is making sure that we request enough now that we don't keep having to ask more every year, which I think was the point last time of making one good request and not every year bringing our hat to the public saying, we made a mistake, we need another 100,000. Which is part of the complaint that we'll talk about later.
I guess we did the Goodrich Road paving. That's the top priority.
It's in priority one. Yeah, the hill here where all the potholes are,
I
the,
mean, yeah, I mean, we're talking about every month. Who wouldn't fix that? I mean, it's great speed bumps, right? Like, I don't, people going fast over months, I like it.
I actually built a spring on power in there.
yeah.
I mean,
I can
obviously
see
it's not being
that.
spring anyway, but it was a strong.
I'm not sure that everyone shares that perspective.
You slow them down, I remember.
Partly depends a lot on whether you walk the driver kids to middle school and high school.
Okay, so budget,
So we-
yeah,
What are we looking at first? We get a little bit
Make sure you have the new
Yeah,
updated
of.
document.
I gave you new handouts.
So not the proposal one.
So Meredith taught me that the date is on the bottom.
Yeah, the one that says 3/28/23 on the bottom is the one you want to be looking at.
Yeah.
So, in case you didn't have a chance to read your email, after 5 o'clock today, we got some late in the afternoon,
Oh,
good
yeah.
news. That, the state issued updated, ED 279s, our subsidy calculation, and said they found an error in how, some of the calculations worked, and they found that the mill rate is actually lower than what they, put on our initial sheets. So what that equates to is that, right, you know, Brian had his complex,
Did you actually
kind
see
of
that?
explanation for mill rates, and it went up, and that's not a good thing, and it's actually now gone down. So the mill rate, when they first published the ED 279s, was 7.29, and that was up from 7.1 last year. So in this revision, it's now 6.97. And what, for us, what that meant was that we will receive an additional 164,912 of state subsidy, and that's a direct correlation to now that's 164,912 less of local required. So it just went directly from local required to state subsidy.
That the total cost didn't change by a penny. It was literally just a shifting between how much we pay and how much they pay.
So what that means is, on the colorful sheet that shows the revenue at the top and and the expenses at the bottom, that line that's increased expenses, and did you put that in the chat? Rachel's going to put the updated sheets in the chat so people at home can see. Is the increase to taxes now stands as the budget is put together currently at $685,078.24. Whereas before that change, it was 800 and something. I don't know.
That's better. 809
Yeah,
and
It's 85.
yeah. Yeah, so that's good news, right? And when we last met, you asked us to begin working on a list of possible reductions. But before I get to that, I gave you a sheet that looks like, this, it has potential budget reductions. And you were gonna put this in the chat too. At the very bottom of that sheet are some things that are just some highlights of things we've changed in the budget. There's actually more than this that has been changed in the budget because you know, an employee comes in and says, I'm changing my insurance election for next year, we change it, but we don't highlight that for everyone to see. So there's some small things like that that have also happened, but these are kind of the budgeted expenditure, reductions and additions that have already been applied to the budget at the very bottom. So we've had $31,299 of reductions already taken out of the budget. You see that at the very bottom in green highlighted. And then we've had 59,994 additions. Majority of that is an additional out of district placement that we felt like we needed based on some updated information. So that's already happened in the budget numbers that you see on this sheet. So those changes are already reflected in these numbers. Everything you see above that is not reflected in the numbers that you saw on the, you know, where we stand with taxes. So everything that's in potential budget reduction section, the staff reduction ideas, other possible considerations, and pending possible reduction are ideas that we're putting forward tonight for consideration as to whether or not we actually apply those to the budget. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? Okay. So let me start with the other piece of good news that we got today is around insurance. And that's in the block that's hard to read. I apologize. That blue block down there is really difficult to read the red font. So we got the insurance ceiling today and it's 6%. We budgeted 10%. And so it's an estimated savings of $69,000. I say estimated because I didn't have Sue go in and change every line with the ceiling because she's going to have to turn around and do it again after next Friday when we get the final reduction. So I'd rather her just do it once. So we've just applied kind of an estimate now.
That's also not in there.
It's also not in there.
So the 685 is down to 615.
Right, yes. So the $69,000 is just, you know, no one's giving anything up. We're not making any changes to what, you know, insurance we're providing. It's just we built in 10% anticipating a possible increase of that scale. And they told us today, statewide, no one's gonna have more than a 6% increase. So next Friday, we find out what our specific increase will be, and that's when we'll make the changes in the budget. So everything else on this list, we give you in the spirit of, you know, what you asked for, which was a list of ideas that you could consider as you try to figure out, you know, how to bring the amount of tax increase down to a level that we feel like is something we can pass over to voters and feel, number one, is something we can sell, but number two, we feel like it's the right ask. So the top section is all about kind of, you know, budgeted requests like supplies, PD, you know, field trips. It's the budget outside of personnel, really. Anything in the budget that's not the personnel costs is in that top section that we've come up with. So this list is not prioritized in any order at the top. We just put everything down that we came up with. And you can see that if we took that total list and said, yes, Meredith, go ahead and do all of that, that would result in $106,000 and some change of reductions to the budget. I can go through these kind of line by line if you'd like. I can say there's one section that's toward the top about PD and travel that, you know, together are about 5 lines of this section. I asked everyone to, professional development, sorry, thanks for asking, professional development and travel. I asked everyone to go back and apply a consistent criteria to see where it would get us in terms of potential reduction. And that is to go back and have everyone have a max of, you can have $300 for registration to some kind of professional development out of district workshop next year. And we'll pay for mileage, but no overnight stays. So basically it's in state. And if you go to Portland, you're gonna, you know, drive and come back. Which, you know, some people do that, some people don't. And seeing where that would get us, with the exception of a few things that are, you know, really either really we don't have a choice in how, you know, what we need and how we have to get it, like AP training, we have to send a couple people to AP training, and that's only offered, you know, a way it requires, you know, out-of-state travel. And, another couple are, conferences that we know is coming to the area, which is a national conference that will be in the Northeast, that we try to send people to when it gets close. That's a speech conference, and the other is a power school conference that if it comes to the Northeast, we've been trying to send a group since 2019 again, or 2020, fall of 2019. We sent a group to that, and it was really beneficial. We've been trying to go back ever since, but hasn't been offered. So if that is offered, we want to send a team to that. Other than that, it's $300 per person and no overnight stays. And that in total is around 37,000 of all of that, you know, all of those savings across the district. You know, I don't see that as something I want to do long term. I think it's just a, you know, 1 year kind of let's do this, tighten our belts to help us get through, you know, some factors that are playing to our disadvantage this year with budget. And, you know, I think we offer folks a lot of professional development opportunities in district. Folks can take classes in the contract if they need something for recertification. And there's a lot offered in state that you can go to and drive to and come back. And even in the local area. So it's not something I want to do long term, but I think it's a reasonable suggestion for something to consider. Other than that, these other areas were either ideas that were brought to us by individuals or something we saw in the budget that we said, you know, let's go and talk to those folks and see if they can find ways to reduce. Like music supply reductions. We just looked at expenditure patterns, and there was a pretty big increase that we saw happening over last year to this year. So we went back and asked, and they found ways to reduce back down, and instead of buying, you know, 2 of this instrument they were going to replace, they're just going to replace 1 this year. Things like that. There's some furnishings that we're deferring in a couple of spaces that are significant savings. I really asked our administrators to not put things on here that weren't at least 4 figures. There is, I think, 1 or 2, but those are things that we put on there for very specific reasons. But, you know, I don't think we gain anything. I don't think it's worth putting something on the list that doesn't feel like significant enough savings to make it, you know, worth what we might be sacrificing to put it on the list. So there's certainly other things that could be looked at, but I think this is what felt like would get us, you know, enough of an impact to have it considered in the first round.
What is, like furnishings, what is it, like art
Furniture, like, you know, a shelf, a table, new chairs, new desks sometimes. The only other thing that probably needs some description, the canoe team costs and the canoe team stipend down below, is because our canoe team coach brought us some information to let us know that we couldn't offer canoe team this year and into the future unless we had a coach that had a credential that we don't hold, that individual doesn't hold. And he's not sure, he's indicated that that's not something he's going to pursue. And he's not sure, you know, that we'll be able to find someone that wants to pursue that. And so we put that forward as consideration for reducing that in the budget. So that's why you see the canoe team costs and then the stipend down below.
So there would be no canoe team.
There is no canoe team this year for sure. And then this would take it out of the budget for next year. So happy to answer questions about anything else in yellow. I just don't want to necessarily say things that are obvious.
In terms of things like art supplies, It's sad, right? It's like $1,000. So these are teachers trying to figure out how to, conduct their curriculum with a little less, or,
Yeah, I mean, in art, music, those two in particular are very supply heavy. And sometimes, if we ask them, can you take a look at your budget? They can say, well, I think I can see that I'm gonna have this much left over, and so I can take these things out. We ask them, don't put down anything that's going to sacrifice, your curriculum next year, but do you see a way to find cost savings in your budget? And this is what they gave us. So, that would be up to the teacher as to where and how they did that. Again, we ask people not to put things down that we're going to sacrifice what, needed to happen in the classroom.
I mean, a key point to remember is not always supply lines are actually spent out. And teachers, like every other person on the planet, sometimes puts in a high number for the first budget guess. Right, which doesn't mean that's what they spent last year, but so I don't think it's accurate to say that you'll always map directly on the ones with curriculum impact.
I think, our teachers do a really nice job of putting together a specific budget, but I think they can also sometimes find ways to, do something a little differently if they need to reduce some for 1 year, or, sometimes have leftover materials from 1 year to the next that they can use into the next year.
I guess part of me wonders, like, is there any way to see like what percentage of these budgets, I see the $1,000 art supply, and I'm like, well, we don't spend that much on visual arts. I mean, that, I don't know, that sounds like more important to keep a little bit for that if it's just the bigger part of the budget, or it's been like the 8,000 for something else, maybe, I don't.
Yeah, it's definitely not the majority of their budget.
Yeah, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand what fraction of their overall, if they're thinking on these.
the whole yellow thing, I think, is like less than 1% of the total budget. But I think, right, this reflects a challenge where the majority of the budget is payroll, essentially, right, or capital improvement. And so you're trying to define in the small wedge of the pie chart where you can squeeze the line, right?
But I guess
Without
the last thing
sacrificing,
that's, right, you don't want to cut some big wedge, which is staff.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering on a line by line, or is art getting sacrificed more than other percentage wise in the supplies? It's like what you can do in the classroom depends on supplies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I think it's a fair question, and I think we went to staff and said, what do you see in your lines that you could do here? And, if there's nothing, that's the answer. If it's just a few hundred, that's not what we're looking for. So, to be honest, these are areas where there's more in supplies in these areas than there are in others, right? There's not a lot of supplies in, language arts, unless it's a book year, they need more books. And that's not always the case. So, I think in terms of finding the kinds of, reduction areas where we can get to an amount that feels like it's worth putting on the list, you have to look in areas that have more budgeted in those lines.
So it's sit.
And so, like for general supplies, usually schools have like a common supply closet, right? Not everyone budgets for pens and paper, and we just have a supply closet. So, that's kind of what everyone draws upon. So what's in there for other supplies, like at Asa Adams, there's, supplies for the math curriculum and the science curriculum, and each teacher gets an allotment, right? And so really there aren't a lot of places to go to other than what we put here, unless we go down further into not 4-figure adjustments.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to propose that we just go ahead and get through the whole document and see the big picture before we.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we could, if invited, I'm sure we could have opinions about each of those line items, but I think getting the big picture and in general, my sense is, kind of giving feedback to the administration about, where we would like to see more or less cuts and then work through the, educational priorities on that works for us. So maybe we can step back to the big picture and then we can kind of give that big picture feedback as, as the board develops a consensus on the budget.
Sure, so to explain a little about staff reduction, you see the list there, and I would say this list is in a priority order. The canoe team stipend is, the top of the list from the recommendation of, the coach and the AD to say, this seems like the right move for now. It might not, we might come back to you in the future if we see a way to do this. The admin assistant hours increase at ASA to, have the position remain at current hours. The third one is, due to the small enrollment coming up from 5th into 6th grade to, reduce by half a teacher at the middle school. That group has been into classroom configuration since 3rd grade. And their enrollment is consistent, it's still at the same place. And so rather than reducing a whole teacher, like we did at ASA, reducing by half a teacher, so we can still have 3 sections for ELA and math at the grade level to allow for more acceleration and leveled options, but have 2 sections in other content areas, and then use that half teacher that would not be used at the middle school to fill a half teacher vacancy, half position vacancy at the high school for an English teacher. So it would be kind of shifting that resource to fill another need. And, continuing to monitor that 6th grade enrollment to see, what it does. We do often see increased enrollment happen through middle school grades. We tend to get, students moving in. We also get superintendent agreement requests. And we do control who we accept for superintendent agreements. And if the class begins to get too big to be able to manage that with our staffing arrangement, we can put a hold on accepting those. But, this is, I think, what the board has, requested we bring to you as we have enrollment fluctuations to help take a look at, how we can be responsive with staffing as those enrollment fluctuations move through our schools. So you see that's kind of the quick explanation for that line. The 4th one down, high school ed tech. This is really thinking about restructuring the 2 ed tech positions at the high school that are not special ed. One of which has been in the library for, 4 or 5 years now. The other was the ed tech we started with ESSER that was an intervention ed tech position. We wanted to keep the intervention ed tech position. We put it in the initial budget, but looking at, needing to offer ideas for how we can reduce. We've worked on a modified job description that would combine those 2 roles somewhat and really move the intervention services and person to be based out of the library and support the library in the way that we need support for our librarian to be able to offer courses and work with classes as often as we've asked that person to do. So restructuring those will basically eliminate 1 ed tech position. No one needs to not have a job. We have plenty of ed tech openings. Someone would just have to be open to moving into special education. So we would, basically re-advertise the position internally first with this modified job description, and people could apply for that position. The 5th one down is restructuring special education services at ASA and reducing by 1 teacher. When Lisa and I talked about needing to add the teacher at the middle school back, December, January, I asked that question, and at that time, she knew of, about 10 kids that were identified that were coming into kindergarten, and was thinking we probably need to keep all our resources at ASA. They've since learned more about that incoming class and are feeling like, there's a way to restructure, to accommodate programming with 4 teachers instead of 5. And so that's something else that's on the list. That one feels a little uncertain about how long that can be sustained. It just depends on, what we see coming through the door in the next year, and how the restructured model works. And then finally, and I think this last one, behavior coach, has, a direct correlation to the reduction of a special ed teacher. That, we see great potential for a behavior coach to meet lots of needs in the school, but it is a new position. And so because it's a new position, I think it has to go on here for us to look at and think about again. But it's my last priority for a reduction because of the case that has been made very, I think, convincingly. Looking at data, I provided some data that Carrie put together around Swiss referrals and a job description for that again. The needs that we see growing are behavior needs. And, we try to keep students in regular ed classrooms as much as possible, and our regular ed staff really need a lot of coaching and support to know how to address those kind of behaviors in the classroom. And also, hopefully reduce referrals to special education as a result, but for sure, help staff know how to meet those needs in the classroom as much as possible. So they're not having to be pulled out to go to a special education room, or things don't escalate as much as they might otherwise. And there's, just an increased need for this addressing emotional dysregulation. And seeing that a lot at ASA, seeing it at all schools, but at ASA, I think COVID had a very real impact on students' ability to self-regulate. And the data that's on the sheet, that one side is the job description, and on the other side is some Swiss data. And, if you want to talk more about that, we can talk about it, but that's there for you to see some of the data that they're seeing that really brings this recommendation forward. So you can see over to the right, I did some running totals, and then you see the overall total. So like the top 2 lines total 14,844, the top 3 lines equal 53,000. So you can see, I gave you that information so you can see it a number of ways. But the total, if we did all of those, it would be a savings of 192,000 and some change. The final thing, we talked a little bit about this last meeting when we talked about budget, is considering reducing school lunch, how we fund school lunch locally by $25,000. I mean, we're constantly getting in trouble with the state because they have too much money. They're only allowed to carry a certain balance, and they try to, spend, and some of it came out of COVID when we were perpetually understaffed, but doing really well in our program and getting good subsidy. We're also getting, strong subsidy because of I don't know all the details, Lynn, you might have to add, but we're getting really good federal subsidy because of part of the COVID response is still giving more.
And the state's matching the difference between reduced and free.
That's it, yeah.
So,
but for sure, for next year, and maybe beyond that, we could consider moving to 25,000, just monitoring how it goes. There will come a time we'll have to increase that again. But if I had to guess, it's not for the next couple of years. So that's everything we have to offer as ideas. But, with the other thing just to remember is the conversation we were having just before we entered into the budget conversation about, in this budget, we have 100,000 well, we have $125,000 in capital improvement, 100,000 of which is there to address capital improvement needs. 25,000 is there to address unanticipated needs that may come up over the course of the year. And then we've been putting in 100,000 from our unassigned fund balance into a capital improvement reserve each year to give us $200,000 to address capital improvement needs. So if we want to increase that, you know, that increases our expenditures if we're doing it out of our budget, which is where I think we have to do it from. And that is not, no increase in capital improvement is built into the budget. I think we were deferring until this moment to see what the picture looked like to decide if and how we wanted to do that.
So that's clearly a lot of work and probably not very fun work from the administration, so I appreciate that. I don't know, I raised the numbers and opinions in my head. I'm just gonna say this, I'll say this is off the top of my head. I'll probably listen to you all and be in a different place, but I look at this and I see that 100K of yellow items, say shrink it back to 50K. Take all of the items that have red next to them under the staff reductions, and I can go through my logic on those, but you know, when you're in a small district and you have tight budgets, you have to be flexible and you have to take flex opportunities when they show up, especially when they show up without having to, you know, impact staff, cutting staff. You have to take them, and you know, when you have a class size of 40 and you have a class size of 75, you just can't. You know, if we're a bigger school, the law of averages would work out better for us, but it doesn't. It works against us because we're a small school, and so we have to track that. So I see all of these, so going down, you know, to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but not 6. So that's 150,000. I don't see any reason not to do the lunch. It may come back in a year or two, it may not come back in a year or two. So that's 225K. That takes our tax increase from, you know, the 880 we were looking at before tonight, the 685, thanks to the mistake by the DOE. And that takes that 685 down to 460 in new taxes. That could still go down with tuition and insurance, but there's no guarantee of that. But that, you know, traditionally, if that goes in a direction, it still goes down. But for now, it'd be 460, which is 0.83 mil, more or less, depending on how the property valuations turn out in August. And I would just, we can talk about whether it comes out of addition, undesignated or comes out of taxes or where it comes out of, but I would just, I think it's time to bite the bullet and maybe not overspend and put in 600,000 into capital improvements, but let's get us up to the 500, and so put 300,000 into capital improvements with a, you know, an active campaign. But this is an attempt to be serious about long-term maintenance. So the school's at 0.54 of a mil, and so in combination between that and the 460, you know, using some of these budget reductions, but not every one of them, that puts us at about 1.37 mil, which will be the biggest increase we've had since I've lived in Orono. It's not at all a small thing. It's not something that's casual that I do very easily, but I just feel like, you know, the state, I'll spare you the numbers, the state has stepped up a little, but they still haven't come close to stepping up to inflation. If you look at our expenses are increasing at a rate that's below inflation and enrollment. That's always a sign of responsibility for me. And a lot of the taxes come down to the state after the fact. So I feel like it's a responsible budget with a below inflation increase in our expenses. We're doing all of the due diligence about squeezing out student enrollments up here and down there. And it's still a really painful increase of 1.37 mil, which, as I said, is the biggest we've seen since I've lived here, which is 13 years. But I feel like it's a responsible budget, and almost half of that increase is about getting serious about capital maintenance. So, off the top of my head, set of numbers and thoughts and proposals about where I'm thinking and what I can live with and what I can't live with. But I'll stop there, and obviously want to hear from other people too.
I do agree that we have to get serious about the maintenance aspect of it. We all read the, you know, survey, and that's no new piece of news for us, right? We've already been moving out to bond, and you know, if we don't, we're just gonna be back in the same boat, you know, 5, 10 years down the road. Yeah.
I guess the question, I mean, I think I agree, but like, what would be your intent going forward to keep putting in 500,000 to keep up
500 plus inflation?
every year?
Yeah,
One thing I want to say, that I neglected to mention, when you said tuition, I just want to kind of add a small caution here that we're seeing a slow amount of incoming enrollment paperwork that gives us a little concern. The deadline is before our next meeting, so at our next meeting, we'll know more. We're about halfway to our target.
so it could
So-
cut the other way with tuition. Okay.
Yeah, just to,
Yeah,
Can you explain to us, Meredith, how the OMS teacher split, how that would work? Would that be a current person then splitting half their time between high school and middle school? And would they have the certification to do that?
yes. So it would be, you know, half the day spent in the middle school, half the day spent in the high school. And there is a staff member that has the certification. And, you know, it requires sacrifice, right? There's some changes that have to be made to middle school schedule. And, you know, someone having to split their time, which is not an easy thing, so, but. You know, we've looked at it, it is doable, but, you know, it's not popular, I can tell you that. People, you know, aren't too happy to hear that's an idea. But I think it's consistent with what we've done in other buildings.
True. It is.
And I don't know, you know, what we've done before is we've rolled like K through 8. We've had that roll up with that cohort, so, you know, the next year, if the enrollment stays the same, that could move into 7th grade. With that cohort, but again, we just have to watch the numbers in the cohort.
and I think an important piece of that, right, if we make the commitment to capture the savings, when the savings show up, we also have to make the commitment to putting the staff back when the numbers go up and demands it. And, you know, I would like to think we've been building that credibility over the last 5 years. You know, the last time we touched a halftime English position, you know, we heard a lot about it, but we said, well, when the numbers are back up, we'll put the position back, and we did. 2 years later, the numbers were back up, and that halftime, if I remember the details correctly, it was 2 years later that halftime position came back again, so. You know, to me, we're just in too small a district to have the luxury of saying there's always 6 teachers of this and 4 teachers of that. We have to track student enrollments. Because it's a little bit shocking. You would think across 70 students, the law of averages would work out, but it doesn't. There are years with 40 students and there's years with 75 students. And we just have to, as a district, we have to be adaptive enough to match that. And we do it with a commitment that when the numbers line back up in a different way again, we put the resources where they are, right? That's the flip side of the coin is we move resources to track students. And when that means the numbers go up, we put the resources in, and the numbers go down. You have to do the flip side, which is we have to move resources. So I look at those staff reduction positions and I don't have a strong opinion about the ACE admin, but I know it comes in second highest recommendation from admin, so I'm happy to address that. The teacher enrollment, I know it's not popular. I'm looking at who's on the Zoom screen. I know why they're here, or guessing why they're here, but I just feel really strongly we have to have that commitment to tracking students, or we're just not going to be able to, you know, run a district that does all the things we do with our budget. And the other 2 positions look very doable to me. They're combining the ed techs. I can see actually even some synergies there. The ACE special ed teacher, and you know, I don't know the details, but on a general principle, you have to have the flexibility to capture opportunities, which is occurring. And you know, I hear the admin team say they can make it work. Maybe the ACE behavior coach, especially if you're going to cut the ACE special ed coaches, and to be clear, that's an addition. That's not a position that's being eliminated. That's a proposed addition that would be capped. were cut if we cut it. Not executed if we didn't, keep it. That seems to me like, that just seems very consistent with the kinds of resources we've been trying to put into SEL, and, it does match up with our case of special ed, so. You know, obviously, other people can and should have different opinions, but the first five I can live with, the sixth one I can't live with. And by the time we're arguing, I kind of am sympathetic to 1,000 here, 1,000 there. By the time we're arguing over 50,000 on a tenth of a mil, I'm imagining that could be put back in constructively. So that's where I end up, but let's hear where other people end up.
I think I'm potentially short. I'm malleable on your suggestion of maybe reducing the yellow area. There's only a few items I feel particularly passionate about. Just so I interpret the second set of box, the staff reduction ideas, the ASA behavioral approach is a proposed position. So the possible suggestion is to not add it.
Right,
Specifics.
right.
So both that and the ASA special education teacher, my gut reaction is no. And I imagine that the great people that work with Lisa and Lisa could make do. But especially in light of the survey results we're going to talk about, and I recognize it's a smaller group, but there was a lot about, students that might have various, people with IEPs that maybe aren't, if we take the survey as representing something, at least some of it suggests that some of those students maybe aren't being best served as they could be. And combining that with the post-COVID kind of comment, that Meredith made, cutting there seems, I don't like it, especially at that young age where maybe those two positions save us later on. So I don't like that very much. I don't like saving money on the kids with the most needs. And I know that that's not the perspective people are taking, they're just trying to figure things out. The other thing I'm worried about is, and this is the tough thing, right? Trying to balance the mill increase. But even getting us to 500K a year, we're just we'll instantly be short 40 grand a year, not even counting inflation. And so I wonder how, again, going forward, how do we get to a point where maybe we don't have to go back in 2 years and again, keep asking for more? Or, I don't know, I am still new to the board, so I don't have that knowledge of the history that people are, saying like, oh, well, you let the buildings get to this point, blah, blah, blah. So those are the two things off the top of my head, to use Brian's phrasing. I'm really resistant against reducing special education, even if it's not there yet. Especially given the report that Carrie provided with us, or the numbers. And just making sure that when we're budgeting for capital improvement, it really does meet our 10-year plan. And if it doesn't, then do we need to change our 10-year plan? But I really would like to, if the voters pass the budget, that it's a budget that will really carry us forward for a while.
Yeah, if I could respond to a couple of things, and I'm gonna ask Lisa to chime in. First, about capital improvement. One of the things I think, just circling back to a commitment to continue to try to seek state support through the state revolving renovation fund to help, lower the local required to accomplish 5,444,000. That can be a significant help for us. So I don't think that, I think there are ways to, offset our actual costs if we're aggressively going after those opportunities when they present. And we've been through that last week. Well, they just had a round that just closed, or they were just awarded in January. So I think it's every 2 years we'll probably see that. So it'll come back out in 2 years. We were awarded the time before that, rather, successfully. We got almost $1 million for the high school, almost $1 million for ASA, and then I think a few thousand for the middle school. We didn't apply for much there. So I think we're well poised to get some state help there. So I guess I think 5,000 is a great number for us to have in the budget to start with, and then we monitor and see.
500.
Sorry, what did I say?
500.
So 500,000. Sorry, 500,000. because, I see other funding
I see,
opportunities.
okay, thank you.
With special education, just to kind of tell you what process led to this. I said a little bit about, Lisa's assessment of, we added a teacher at the middle school because we have a cohort moving to the middle school that we need to add a teacher there. And it kind of aligns with the principle that we were talking about with moving with the cohort. And when we first did that, Lisa felt like she needed to leave all the teachers in place at ASA. And then upon further kind of examination, I asked Lisa, can you look at staffing to see if there are places where you can offer, reduction ideas, ed techs or teachers? And she actually said that, it would be a harder, she doesn't see a way to really reduce ed techs at this point. But she sees a way to restructure at ASA, given the cohort moving, setting up a classroom here, and what she knows about the incoming class. I'm sure if you ask Lisa, do you want 5 or do you want 4 teachers at ASA? I don't know. I would assume she'd say, I want more. It makes, but what she said is, I see a possibility here for restructuring. I think if you asked any of us, do you want the things on this list? Sure, we want the things on this list, but can we see a way to do it another way for, the next year? We do. So I say that's the process we went through to arrive at this list. And what was put forward was a teacher instead of an ed tech, because she feels like programmatically she needs the ed tech she has. So.
Yeah, so I think it's important to distinguish between the social and emotional behavioral needs across the entire school and with a special ed teacher who, depends on what kind of teaching, whether he has somewhere between 1 and 10 students in that classroom, and who is not going to be addressing needs across the whole school, which personally is why, I put the line between 5 and 6. So 6 is addressing social, emotional, behavioral needs across the entire school, whereas 5 is addressing the needs in a single classroom for obviously students who need help. That I'm kind of taking the administration at the word that there's a reduced need, not because of COVID contacts, but just literally because of students moving between school buildings. So that's just my thinking on that.
I mean, I know Lisa's very capable. I just, there's not a time that she reports out where she says, things are smooth here, we've caught up. So, she said, everything she does is with a smile and with confidence, and she's wonderful to work with in the times I've been on hiring committees with her. But I think a lot of that expertise and experience covers up the franticness that's going on there, and a loss of staff trying to keep people hired. And my concern is that, if they can make do, but that causes a bit more wear and tear, and we lose some of the talented people because we can make do. I don't know. I just really worry about those kids that really need the most having to make do. I mean, everyone's going to have to make do, but I'm just off the top of my head, my resistance to certain things. But thank you. The capital gains thing was really helpful, particularly.
So just to put it into a little perspective, I have 16 kids moving up to OMS. That'll be in the 6th grade. I have 8 coming in, so that's kind of a reduction of 8. When I give numbers, I'm giving numbers for all students, including those that only get perhaps minimal services, like let's say speech therapy or occupational therapy. When I look at the number of kids that require case management, that require more instruction with academics, reading, writing, and math, behavior, social emotional supports, I have 52 students looking at next year at this point, from K through 5. And I think it's possible to divide the case management among 4 teachers, especially, and why I didn't want to get rid of ed techs is they're providing more of that support in the classroom. We have some really amazing ed techs that can really be put in those instructional roles as well. And as Meredith said, if you were to ask me, do I want 5? Do I want 4? I'd probably say 5, but all I can think of as we're talking is this reminds me of a Jenga game, and I've got 3 blocks going across, and I can really feel that loose one in the middle and pull it out and feel like, you know, there's a little bit of tug on it. I'm gonna pull it out and it'll all be fine. But there is that feeling like, I really hope it doesn't come crashing down. But I do have the confidence that I could probably pull this one out and we can make it work. I know that probably doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence in the way I described that, but
A little more action. It's reality, right?
it's honest.
Yeah. What do other people think? Other board members? Either on total picture or specific items?
I'm always happy spending more money. Yeah, but I don't know, I think that, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wanna cut deep on anything that's gonna hurt. I think like on the yellow things, like, I mean, my preference would be if you're gonna cut some of those things out, that we keep in the things that are really directly about supplying classrooms and doing education, and maybe things that are a little secondary, like, you know, security cameras or things that we feel like travel and conference, we can cover in other ways, like we'll focus on the things that are, the short in supply of visual arts and things like that, so, just in general. Yeah, I'm happy with your way or your way. So, I definitely agree though, that I think the ACE behavior coach that should definitely stay in. And I mean, some of those other positions would be great to stay in if we feel like we can keep them in.
I mean, one of my thoughts on the yellow, and correct me if I'm thinking about this wrong, is those are really just kind of figuring the clip, because those are like bad year cuts that we would hope to reverse in the future. And so
Summer,
if we
yeah.
got 100,000, we're gonna really want to put the 100,000 back in a year or two, so. If.
There's some that are like that and some that aren't, right?
Yeah, okay.
And that would probably be the lens we would take.
Other thoughts? Jake or Mark?
I guess I'm in a little bit of a different spot than everybody who's talked so far. I'm, yes, I'd rather not have to do it, obviously, but I'm supportive of accepting everything in yellow. I guess the security cams be the one thing I'd probably want to keep. You know, I know there's been a couple of situations in recent years where we wish we would have had cameras in certain spots we didn't. But I'm happy with everything in yellow. In terms of positions, for me, I think a 1.37 mil increase is too high. So I'm supportive of, again, not that I want to do this, I'd rather keep all of these positions, but I'm supportive of accepting all of those position staff reduction savings, including the ACE behavior coach. The one thing I would like a little more information on for the OMS teacher arrangement, the high school, I know I have this at home in my pile of stuff. And I wonder if, and again, normally I fully agree with Brian on the flexibility. We need to be flexible and move teachers where students go. I do worry a little bit that because the OMS teaching staff is already so small that even removing out a half piece might have a bigger impact than it would at one of the other two schools. So I wonder if maybe for 1 year only, could we cover the need at the high school by maybe just going up in enrollment size on some of these English electives? I know we had numbers presented to us in average enrollment. I can't remember what those English numbers were, but I'd want a little more information on that. But even if that means that a push came to shove, and that was the recommendation was to keep that in, I'd be supportive of all 6 of those reductions. I'm also certainly supportive of the lunch reduction, given the fact that we are regularly kind of dinged for there's too much money here, and taking 25 out is fine in this particular round. There's a couple of other items in the list of increases that I think I'd at least want to have an explanation for why they're there. And they don't add up to much, but maybe if we put those in, we could look at some other things. You know, we've got staff tuition lines going up by 16K. Do we need to do that? Do we really need 12 grand in new lights for this $6 million performing arts center we just built? I don't think so. I think we can get by. I don't even know what the lights are, but I'm just going to say no. But we can wait a year on those if we need them all. So I'd like to maybe throw those in the hopper. And then the construction part, I think Brian's right. I do think we have to get serious about addressing these needs. I also, fully appreciate that we need to be consistent. You know, we can't just increase that line for a year and then bring it back down. That's not gonna help us, right? But given that we are in a challenging budget year, that's become less challenging with the additional state funding, but still not great. Could we increase that in the budget by, instead of 500K, say 300K, and then take 200 out of, carry forward for next year, and put that in, to either a capital line or the capital improvements fund or whatever. I don't know if that's an option. This is at least something to think about. So, so that's where I am. And I also appreciate the hard work of Meredith and the admin team and teachers and coming up with this.
I think part of the problem here, or at least something that I'm thinking about, is I don't think this situation is a one-year thing. I think we're gonna be in this situation, I think worse, this time next year. And the year after that, I don't think this situation that we're in right now is gonna improve anytime soon. So although I appreciate what you're saying, Mark, about, you know, hey, maybe we can go from 500 to 300, and I just think it puts us in a worse, you know, we're in a worse situation next year, and we have to make that up.
To respond to a couple of things you said, staff tuition is, you know, contractual, and we look at what's requested and what people, you know, can take in the contract, and look at history and what we know about people who are enrolled in programs, and really try to budget as lean as we feel like we can, but recognizing that, you know, the contract allows for tuition. So I don't really think there's reduction to be found there. The pack lights, they did reduce by 2,700, you see down there. So they've reduced it down, and, you know, I think there's been a lot of due diligence and conversation about learning what we have and what we don't have, and what we need. And, you know, they submitted that these are the things, and it's not 12,000 now just of lights. It's, I think, about 5,000 of lights, and then some other material supply. They need a supply budget. We didn't budget for that this year. They need, you know, supplies for different things. So, that one has been reduced some already, and part on the list as well.
Did you have any thoughts on the budget piece, on the capital piece?
You know, yellow.
Yeah, yellow or the position below?
Yeah, yes, I'm okay with the recommendations given. The only thing I would hesitate on is that sixth recommendation of the behavioral coach. Only because, the impact would be across the entirety of ASA, so it would help out a lot of teachers, and, you know, obviously things aren't getting better with post-COVID in regards to that. So I guess I'm basically saying that I'm, with Mark, with the exception of the ASA behavioral coaching.
It would take all of the yellow and stop at 5 instead of 6, and take the lunch.
So we have 2 meetings left. It's kind of to frame what the task before us. The next meeting, I think I know we'll have the insurance final answer, and we'll have a better indication of tuition. And so I really think the next meeting is the meeting where we make decisions, and then we make final decisions April 25th, so that we can prepare warrants for you to sign at the next meeting. So, you know, this is an important meeting for us to get information to know, do you need more, you know, data brought to you to consider this? And, you know, I haven't heard a lot more requests for information. I think Mark just said that, you know, he wants us to look at, you know, what is the impact at OMS, what does class size look like at the high school? That's something we can bring more information on.
I think the other thing that would be helpful, and I think we have a version of this month or so ago, but just to state that the, undesignated fund and the long-term trajectory of that. And
Yeah.
I generally don't want to tap that to cover, recurring operating expenses, but that's all. Other than property taxes, that's the only lever the board has, is to increase or decrease the take out from there, so it'd be good to have that conversation with the data.
Yes, the other thing that Lynn has to do after the March, after this week's warrant is do a projection, and we plan on bringing that to you. Like how we are forecasting we're going to finish this year, because that plays into what our unassigned is gonna look like going into next year. So,
You said earlier that unlike the last few years, you don't think that we'll end up underspending significantly.
right.
That's still true.
I mean, energy costs are just,
See it on.
hurting us this year. I mean, we are going to tap into that fuel stabilization, but that doesn't help, the electricity costs, that's not fuel stabilization eligible. And just inflation has hit us in lots of ways with supplies. But, time will tell. Our sub costs are high this year. So we will just, I think we'll have a better sense after we can finish the warrant that we're doing this week and really take a hard look at what's left. And,
But we are definitely hitting the fuel stabilization this year, actually in this warrant. So you'll see that coming on this warrant this week. The electricity is, way higher, but it's kind of a compacted problem because they're struggling on their end.
they're struggling with solar credits and how to credit things. So there's a major lag in billing right now from Versant. Because they, I'm sure it takes extra calculations to figure out solar credits, so.
Yeah, so we're like way behind as far as even getting our billing for that, so that's a hard unknown, but we're gonna see what we can.
But it's not gonna be free electricity.
It's not.
It's not gonna be free. Just a little harder to forecast because we needed a little more through winter months to really feel like we had a good picture. And we've gotten so far.
And then, of course, we had a very warm winter, so it's probably, maybe that's gonna be the future, but it's probably not the best year to project from either.
Yeah, it's just hard to know. And we had expansion, so we can't look back, we're looking at, new square footage. So there are a lot of factors that we can't look in prior years to predict. So.
Winters aren't gonna get warmer, Brian. Climate change is coming.
Thanks for letting me know.
All right, so,
Everybody done?
would you like us to do anything with the yellow to kind of categorize it in any way? Kind of prioritize from our perspective? Would that help some of you?
I think it is helpful to see your priorities. I think that does help. It helps, for example, hearing a bit about the canoe team, given the state of things, it's not like you've told the canoe guy to, whatever, so it's not gonna happen anyway. And it doesn't sound like it's going to happen unless there's a new person. The little things like that are reassuring that we're not just, cutting out the canoe team and those students who wanted the canoe will have no canoeing.
Right.
And then priorities, it does help, especially when we get down to these, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, which are just such small fractions. That if it's not a huge priority, then maybe we can argue to keep it in.
One of the things that I alluded to earlier, forgot to mention, when we have a retirement, we do make an adjustment in the budget. So we'll be doing that between now and the next time you see these documents with our, the new notification we got, and that is the savings. I mean, it's a forecasted estimate of, we do a middle of the road experienced teacher, and sometimes we win on that calculation and sometimes we don't. So but it works for us over time. So there will be a savings with that as well.
And there are a few things I would say on this list that are similar to the canoe team, where we put them on the list because we became aware of them, but it's really just a matter of maybe it was a duplication or, we learned of another resource where we're gonna get something. So some of these things on here are not necessarily like cutting anything. It's just a different situation that has occurred or come up with, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, as long as like teachers aren't feeling pressured to like give up on something they're wanting to teach or that sort of thing like that. It sounds like that's the case.
Well, I mean, I would say, teachers understand a budget position, but there's also sacrifice. I mean, it's not without some sacrifice to say, we're gonna limit you with professional development in this way. So, to be clear, all of this comes with some amount of sacrifice. I think, the sacrifice feels further away from like the essential mission of the district for some of these than others. Bill said we could do without a rug machine, we'll keep sharing for a while, right? And I think that's something that probably feels like something okay to do, right? But I think the challenge in our district that's been a long-standing challenge is that when times are hard, we haven't been willing to make decisions that were closer to kids. And that's why our buildings became in the state they were. So we just have to be careful to not lose the long view here as well. That we can't let things deteriorate around us by, not disrupting things a little bit occasionally when we see an opportunity, like with the staffing changes. I mean, it's disruptive. It is to go from, this many teachers in a grade to less or more. But I think it's the responsible thing to do in our budget that helps us, do other things we have to do.
So we get to do this twice more. They're really good for wrapping up tonight and, picture solidifies as time goes on. So definitely premature to be making final decisions at this point, but I think we'll, we look forward to requests for additional information. We'll have to discuss them. Essentially have the same conversation again next time, but with more information. And with more of a request for precision answer. Okay, moving on to the school calendar. This is the second time through, so I assume we're looking through it both tonight.
Right, there've been no changes since we last reviewed this.
I would make a motion to approve the school calendar as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 4-1. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
I will say I got some email from parents who were in the same boat as you, but I responded back to them with some suggestions and didn't hear a whole lot more, so. Your objection?
Yeah, I'm not objecting to the professional development. I think that's great. I just don't think that's the best way to do it. And I also think it's disruptive to parents. In that order.
Strategic plan update. All right.
Yes, I wanted to report on two things. We had a really good response from particularly parents and students for the strategic plan committee. I'm having to kind of seek a few more staff, a couple more staff members for this group. So I'm in the process of going through those applicants and, some of the parents who submitted, I think also have the potential to be really good at community roles that we identified who may wear both of those kind of perspectives. So I was really pleased to see some new names that, haven't been involved in some of our, committee work or interview committees. So I think it was a great process to go out and let people, raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested in that. So, the other thing is I wanted to set some meeting dates with you all. Everyone here is on the team. And I think it would be helpful for people who I'm reaching out to say, would you serve, to at least have this initial set of meeting dates identified. I would like to, use Tuesday evenings because most of us don't have commitments on Tuesday evenings because we cleared it for this kind of meeting. And we have, 3 non-board meeting nights in May and June that are Tuesday nights. So we have one on May 2nd, one on May 16th, and one on June 13th. And I'd like to propose that we use those 3 nights as strategic planning meeting nights from like 6 to 8 potentially.
What are those dates again?
May 2nd, May 16th, and June 13th. June 13th is the forecasted last day of school right now, so.
Probably not here. but 60.
But then I'd also like to propose that April 11th, we have a board meeting that night, but have like maybe a meeting from 5 to 6. That's just an organizational meeting. It's probably Zoom, perhaps just to, you know, begin to orient everyone to the work and have some initial conversations, maybe some initial look at data review, and just to get organized for the work ahead. To do that on a board meeting night, because we don't really have another non-board meeting night that's not during like the vacation week. So April 11th from 5 to 6, which would be just before our board meeting, and then those dates that I mentioned.
So again, so May 2nd. And what is the time here?
I'm thinking 6 to 8. But that's flexible if we want to do. I'd like to have a couple of hours each time we meet.
May 2nd, May 16th.
So April 11th would be before the meeting, you said.
Right.
I am probably out of town on the 16th of May. That doesn't mean it's going to a halt.
And we might, maybe to. But maybe,
Well, I think there are going to be times when not everyone can be present. But, you know, we can also always offer a Zoom option if people can join that way.
I can do the Tuesday, 6 to 8, definitely in May, June, maybe not, I think I can. The 4/11, 5 to 6, I would be here, the earliest I could be here would be 5:30, I've got a meeting in campus at 5:15. I can probably be here by 5:30, but I can't be here at 5.
and moving forward, like, are we meeting more over the summer? Or something?
I think we need to survey the committee, and it might be that we work in some subcommittees over that time. That's a little easier to get people together in smaller groups around people's schedules. So I think that's probably the best we could hope for summer engagement. But then picking back up with full committee meetings in the fall.
And would it be here, or do we have another space to meet, or?
We would probably use the steam room. Yeah, we.
Sounds very industrial.
In this complex, we'll just say somewhere in this complex, it might be in here, you know,
Oh, STEAM isn't like STEM plus art.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Pipes there.
right, well, there are, it is kind of industrial
What was it?
looking.
Good.
You speaking with Shell.
Oh, okay. I like wood shops.
So.
I'm available, I think, at all of those, so I can, I don't go anywhere.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Appreciate your availability.
Yes, lack of ambition.
Meredith knows my boss.
Right, one meeting at a time, that's big.
So we're a good, are we doing Tuesday the 11th then? I'm gonna put it on my calendar. Or we're not sure.
Can everyone else make it?
I don't let me hold you up, I'll get here as soon as I can get here.
Tuesday, wait,
The 11 from 5 to 6.
11, April.
Yeah.
There's,
And then the others are the non-board meeting Tuesday nights in May and June, from 6 to 8. Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
All right, to the board self-evaluation. Everybody good, or do we need to take a bio break?
Maybe right? I also did this one, this is the survey results that you sent out yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, because I haven't actually looked at that yet. I need more time. Things like that.
5 minutes.
So. You know, like things.
Okay,
I read them. But yeah.
why don't we take a 5-minute break?
I'll walk further to the bathroom. What's that?
Rub it in.
Slightly on the healthy side, it's not straight up candy. I think we're. Oh, there you go.
Remember? We will get it from start soccer.
Rachel would bring the snacks.
Oh, Stanley. We're done by the time school.
Favorite.
That was usually for others, so maybe it's not, maybe it's the last one. Yeah, you're probably right.
He's greedy.
Yeah.
You come from the state board. Meredith has my cell phone number. She knows me. I think these guys all do too.
I just paid you some market comments.
I know. Have a good night.
Good night,
Good night.
Find some more money then.
Before we had to get down to. And she's like, oh, it's, wait a minute, what's the change? I'm not even good, because every time they do, I'm coming out, the 100% lose. No, it's good.
Where did these?
Which.
Right.
One of those things, probably we all love it.
But I have that thing.
Of course, every day. Every day.
But of course, we live through the
Oh, yeah, that's right.
RSU.
Context matters.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay, no.
That's what I refuse to play.
Problem. Is, my opinion, is more communities. Can't have them hold it in school. The kids here for half a day, that's state law. I would probably pay.
It's my kid's snack drawer.
I'm essentially a child.
I think they'll survive.
Or young adults in their case.
Does Graham look like he's gonna suffer too?
Take my children.
No.
But hell wins for
That's right. All right, I think we got everybody back in 5 minutes. So, just to remind everybody, this is, tail end of the process for the board. We agreed on a survey format. The survey was run. I closed it on Friday. I apologize, for the short turnaround, but I did promise people until Friday, so.
Is there, I mean, I guess my question is there any way we could talk about this next week or something, or is it we need to do this now? I guess that's the question.
We could defer it. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks.
And I looked at, you sent that one particular, I looked at the Google, I searched that part of it this year, but
Yeah,
I didn't. I mean, I detailed that.
sure. No, I understand. And I mean, we could also just go ahead with.
Yeah, go for
But it's really, I'm happy to do whatever the board thinks. I do think it's an important exercise though, at some point of accountability. We subject the superintendent and the principals to surveys and obviously those don't get discussed, and shouldn't be, but for the board, in particular, I think the most important thing is to have a feedback that the community knows that we're hearing and seeing. What the rest of the board thinks. We defer it till next meeting, which I guess is 2 weeks from now, or
My only concern is our meetings are not, it's not like we have room that many either.
they're not gonna get shorter. I agree. It'll only be a question of preparation time.
I think probably in the discussion, the big picture takeaway is that we'll be able to get enough of, have at least the big picture, to be able to still weigh in on, substantively, and then when he has time to look at maybe some of the details, we can always circle back, right? I mean, there's nothing that says we discuss it now and we're done, right?
That's right. We can
Always
always
an
come back.
opportunity to bring it back.
Right. So, yeah, so we have the quantitative and the qualitative feedback. I'll just go back with my impressions and then we can maybe just, go down the row and let everybody hear what they took out of it. And then, obviously this is a self-assessment of the board to reflect about what we could do better. And it's also, for me in particular, this often feeds into the goal setting process that we do in June, right, to kind of completely close that loop from feedback to action. So we had 39 respondents, almost exactly split between community and staff or employees. I didn't break out. I think we only have one student response. So community is mostly parents or community members. Employees, we had some admin but it's mostly teachers and some staff. But I think 25 of the 35 were teachers. So mostly teachers in the employee bucket and mostly parents in the community bucket. So one thing that struck me is this is increasingly a how is the district doing survey and not a how is the board doing survey, right? We moved away from those ISLIC standards, which I think there are some very good reasons we did that. Mostly they were asking questions that nobody knew what they meant and didn't spend enough time watching the board to answer. But I do think it's important we continue to think about that question too, is how is the board functioning and how could the board function better? Makes me wonder if we want to put a question or two back about does the board treat public comment with respect? Does the board listen to each other? One or two just sort of board performance questions might be something we want to do going forward. As a how is the district doing? This is only the second year of longitudinal study. Only second time we've run this survey, so don't have a long history, but compared to last year, I think it's safe to say both the staff and the parents are less happy than last year. Just taking the quantitative scores, they kind of go from a 5.1 to a 4.6, 4.8. Last year was the best year, or the most happy year that I saw. I always felt that was kind of a bit of a COVID bounce back. Everybody was happy to be moving past COVID. I'm also fairly grateful that they felt the board and administration had navigated COVID reasonably strongly in this district, and so I felt that. So I don't know if this is it's a decline, but I don't know if that represents a meaningful decline or just a return to normal from. Traditionally, the board has not fared well when they survey. People let us know what they don't like, and that's good. That's what we're here for. Certainly heard, I'm kind of in that COVID context, certainly heard from a lot of teachers that COVID is not over for them in the sense of the social, emotional, behavioral, and also learning, although I think everybody would focus on the social, emotional, behavioral. challenges, as well as just burnout. That's, I think, very real. I didn't hear a whole lot of suggestions. That's where it gets hard. I don't have any doubt. I'm deeply sympathetic, including in my own life, but it's real. I just don't know what that turns into as a solution, but you know, it's important at least to acknowledge it. We had much stronger feedback about, not, meeting every student where they're at and moving them forward than we've had in the past. That question has always kind of, all three of the values, usually we got pretty strong positive feedback, but to me, it really jumped out a bit more this year about meeting students where they're at. You know, and across all the comments, some people are like, well, we don't need our special ed students' needs, well, we don't need the needs of the students in the middle, well, we don't need to meet the needs of the students at the top, so that, you know, there was all perspectives on that, but, didn't do a formal count analysis. I'm not a qualitative, person, but what I heard most strongly was, continuing their, whether it's, I don't think it's top 10%, top 10, 20, 30% of students just are not being challenged. And most strongly in particular in the middle school. I don't think that's a reflection on middle school teaching. I think that's a reflection on middle school as a social phenomenon. And the fact that kids continue to, you know, separate through time. And by the time you get to high school, you have more opportunities for a variety of classes. So I don't think that is a reflection on anybody in particular, but it did jump out at me that I continue to be disappointed in people who treat this conversation as a zero-sum conversation about, you know, there were comments about the board pays too much attention to this group of students, and that's just, I don't get where those comments come from. This is a district that has the resources to pay attention to every group of students. And I don't know why people have to turn it into, well, if you talk about those students, then you don't care about these students. That's just not, it's not how the board works. We're double the state formula on special education spending, and I'm happy to be there. By and large, if you look at our chapter 104 programming, we're high in the state there. If you look at our class sizes, we're high there. It's, you know, this is a district that pays attention to all of our students. I just don't think it's a constructive conversation to say, well, if you talk about those students, you don't care about these students. In a district with the resources we have, we ought to be able to have a conversation about a group of students and, you know, keep the conversation to that group of students about, are we or are we not meeting this group of students without having to turn it into a, well, then that means my students suffer. So that tone I found a little bit disappointing. But again, there are concerns about all groups of students, which I think are fair and valid, but the strongest ones I heard were we're just not challenged. There's a group of students who are bored and not feeling challenged, which I think continues. We put it as a board goal last year, and there was a clear recognition of progress and a clear appreciation of progress around that, but I think there's more work to do. Without going into a lot of detail, and I should also say, you know, there were a lot of specific comments, some of them named the teacher, some of them named the classroom. Those are not, you know, we can't get into that in a board meeting, so I just want to be clear, that doesn't mean we haven't read it, that just because we're not reflecting on a particular employer, a particular situation, doesn't mean we haven't read it, but that's not appropriate for a board conversation in public. But just one really general statement, I noticed a bit of a divergence between high school teachers and high school parents, with high school parents having a bit more positive view about seeing change in a positive light, and teachers seeing change maybe in a slightly less positive light. There was multiple comments. I think it's mostly teachers who identified them as being high school, and it was mostly teachers talking about rigor. And I have to say, I don't know what the word rigor means. But I also don't know, for me, how rigor maps onto the values that we have, you know, meeting each student where they're at and having them grow, addressing the whole student and a learning mindset. But I would have to hear more to convince me that rigor was a goal that we should be aiming for. And in fact, from the parents, I think there's a, you know, occasional concern that we stress students out too much. So I heard from teachers, there's a worry about rigor, but I actually would have to hear more about what that means to get on board with what that actually, you know, it's not a value that I recognize. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but it's not a value I immediately recognize as a priority that we talk about. And the last thing I picked out is there was a very overwhelming response. Of course, these are all people, parents or teachers, with an investment in our schools, but there was an overwhelming response in favor of continuing to address the maintenance needs of the district. I'm sure if we had a representative sample of taxpayers who weren't in the schools, I still think we would have a favorable response, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be quite as favorable, but just to recognize there was an overwhelmingly favorable response for that, and an increasing recognition that OMS needs help, which we've already talked about. I heard that. Those were all things that I took out of the survey, big picture. You know, again, we got 70 people. We have several hundred sentences of qualitative feedback. There's lots of detail in there, but when I try and look at trends that sweep across everything, those were things I took out of it. We did not get much at all that was evaluative of the board. You know, I think the board has had a weird dynamic where we had 3 very long-term board members and 2 brand new board members. I would like to think we've navigated that pretty well. You know, I'd very much like to hear from the new board members' perspective about that, but that probably creates more challenges than immediately obvious, just because, you know, people coming from different places, different histories, but that's something that I hope we pay attention to and continue to navigate well. So usually we have 1 new person coming on at a time, so it was definitely a dynamic. I hope we were doing okay with that. My overall sense is the board continues to be pretty civil and respectful and listening to each other. We have more diverse opinions than we've had it sometimes in the past, and that to me is a healthy thing as long as the respect and listening continues. And ultimately, you know, we're set up to be a majority rule board, and I'm okay with having dissenting opinions. In fact, I think it's a healthy thing to continue to have dissenting opinions. And over my 8 years, I've become a pretty strong believer in the power of a discussion process and a vote. And oftentimes I'm on the losing side of the vote, and 2 years later, I'm like, yeah, that was the right decision that the group made. So I have a pretty high respect for the power of the group. I feel like most of the rest of the board responsibilities, I think we're taking fiscal responsibility, buildings, pretty seriously. So I don't know, easy for me to say because I've been here a long time. I'm pretty happy with the status quo on the board, and I didn't hear a whole lot that contradicted it, but I also didn't hear a whole lot that supported that. But that's kind of my default thought process. Should we just go down on the row? You want to go next, John?
Sure. I heard a lot of what you said as well. I kind of wrote down my thoughts slightly differently. I kind of heard concerns around differentiations, how I kind of phrased it in terms of meeting students where they are, and whether or not we're supporting a growth mindset. Maybe what does failure mean? I thought there were some divergent opinions on what failure meant to the different respondents. Some concerns around what I described as non-academic needs, which would dovetail with the social emotional learning, you know, whether it's recess time or it's a chance to kind of decompress or to make sense of the set of experiences students have had the past 3 or 4 years, along with staff and faculty and admin. One sense I got from reading the qualitative data was, you know, I guess communication is how I'd start with it. And it's a sense of whether or not we've communicated well. And sort of regardless if we have, there was a sense from the respondents that we haven't done it as well. Like they don't feel like we have. Some critiques about, you know, finding information on the website. Do they know where to find resources, or are they aware of the work that's the plans that are being done for capital improvement? Are they, like, what are they aware of? So that's a little, you know, concerning, and I wouldn't mind, you know, kind of going forward, thinking about our board goals, whether or not we could brainstorm ways of being more connected to the community. I mean, it may not help, you know. It can be tough coming to these board meetings. I definitely never watched a board meeting until I became a board member. And if I stopped being a board member, I would probably watch more than 0. So I kind of wonder about meeting the community where they are at, and you know, if they don't feel communicated with, then we're not communicating with them, even though we're trying. You know, we do record these and we post them on YouTube, and they are available. But that was something. I also heard the concerns about building repair and cleanliness, and divergent opinions on leadership. Yeah, there was certainly a certain number of lines where you read, A is not good, and the next line was, I'm so happy about A. And so trying to get rid of the noise was, but if I had to sum it up, I would say concerned about whether or not we're fostering a growth mindset and maybe how differentiation ties into that. Non-academic / social emotional learning needs connected to COVID, whether or not we're communicating effectively, and buildings are the big things that stood out to me.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
No, do you want to just pass and have a chance to?
Ask real quickly, you did mention in your email, the idea of going into executive session, talk about some of the specifics, like at the end, if that's what we could maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that's employee specific, whether by title or by name, needs to stay out of the public comment.
Or click and figure it out.
Yeah, or even, you know, dancing around it so people can figure out what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We need to just stay away from anything that's addressing single individuals or, in my mind, single grades. Maybe school level comments are okay, but
Yeah, and I guess, I mean. Yeah, my question, I mean, I feel like I'm hearing these concerns and questions about how we address them all. I'll read this later and.
okay. All right,
I don't wanna serve as an echo, but I mean, for me, the two big things that stuck out here, and again, this, out of all the different surveys we've done, this one is probably, I think this is the first time where none of us have been mentioned by name, which is, lends even more credence to your point that this really is a district climate survey more than it is a board survey. And I also would agree that maybe you might want to put a couple of board specific questions back in next year, recognizing that for many people, the vast majority of people follow the pre-board Kevin model of watching zero board meetings, right? So they might not be able to answer it, but this really is a district climate survey. The two things that stuck out to me were one, this idea that we are again not meeting the needs of certain groups of students, mostly having to do with you know, kind of meeting them where they are and pushing them forward. You know, that there are groups of students and different people focused on different groups, but that we're not meeting the needs of X group of students, right? And it all does, I think Kevin's characterization of this differentiation is a useful way to think about it, because I think that's what all the comments are getting at, that because we weren't differentiating enough, X group of students, which again, the group being variable is not being served as well as they could. So I think that's, and you know, for Brian and Jake and I know that that's a long-standing concern. I think there's been a lot of progress in recent years on that for sure. But I think from this survey, it's clear that some people think there's still a ways to go on that. The second is facilities, as people have already mentioned, right, in terms of both maintenance, upkeep, there's concern, you know, with the cleanliness of buildings. And again, all of these things are in some way, shape, or longstanding concerns, which points out what we already knew, right, is that we need to take serious action to start meeting these needs. And then I guess the other thing, and then there's a lot of other smaller parts that I think we do need to, you know, maybe at least think about. But one other area I think that we kind of jumped out at me a little bit is there is, you know, some concern and some significant difference of opinion about, you know, certain leadership models, and I think that we need to think about that and talk about that as a board. So that's my take, big picture take on the survey.
okay,
So the advantage of going last is you don't have to repeat everything that I already said, because honestly, there's nothing I have on my list that someone hasn't mentioned, although I will say the three of us have been around long enough that we've seen a lot of surveys come back, and I was a little bit disheartened. This is probably one of the more non-favorable ones, I guess I'll say, that I've seen in my time. I read through the entire thing, and I would probably say 85 to 90% of it was not positive. It was uncommon to come across a positive comment. So that was a little bit alarming to some degree. But as far as, that's really the only new observation I have as far as the things saw all the things that you would all mention. And, yeah.
So, I guess I have a question, it's about the idea of the board. Like, when people in the past where they were commenting on the board and they're not now, and I guess, I mean, I've never seen almost anybody comment on a board meeting in the past, did they used to and resume, or is it like? I mean, and I mean, in some ways, maybe it's good that they don't know we exist and things are just functioning and like that may be a good thing. But like,
To Brian's point, it really is not necessarily a survey. Well, people don't give their opinion about the boards, their opinion about the district.
yeah,
And to that mention, this is probably one of the more non-positive, well, this is non-positive one I've ever.
yeah.
I would say,
I mean,
you know, they comment on when people come when there's an issue they care about,
Right.
when something's going to happen they don't like, right? And so typically we hear, you know, you might have board comments following those in the board survey that year.
Right.
Where there was a decision made by the board that some group felt was not the right decision.
The other thing I try to keep in mind too, obviously all the feedback is valid, but I think by the nature of humans, people don't necessarily participate in this stuff when they're really, and they tend to participate, like you said, Meredith, they tend to participate in these things when they're unhappy. More so than happy.
Yeah.
But still, I'm just basing it off my experience of all the ones that I've read over the last 10 years. This is the most positive.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the qualitative comments,
Yeah.
the frequency of it, yeah. I mean, a little bit to answer your question, though, is we changed the format 2 years ago. And up until 2 years ago, we did something very similar to the superintendent survey, which was these international, school leadership standards. About, you know, listening to stakeholders and, addressing the state and political context and. So it was much more questions about the board. And we got over and over these answers about, I never watched board meetings, so I don't know the answer. Yeah. And so 2 years ago, we switched to, this is what the board's responsible for. Let's just ask how people are feeling about these areas of responsibility, which is much more turned it into feedback about the district as opposed to feedback about the board. There's pros and cons either way. I personally am mostly happy with the way it is, but I'd like to go back with a question or two about board function as well. You know, Mark said we didn't get a comment about individual board members, which is true. I've had both very positive and very negative comments about me singly as a board member. But most years we get comments about, for example, you know, the tone of the board diversity or lack of diversity, none of those kinds of comments. People very much.
I think we did get one, right?
Yeah, there was
There's one that said that we could use more diversity.
Yeah,
So that was the one.
yeah.
We have short hair and long hair there.
Meredith, I know you had a chance to read it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to
I
give
don't have anything new to add. I would just say, you know, I agree with everything, all the observations that have been shared. And I also agree. I think it's the nature of this survey is lending itself for people just to have more to say than they had to say about more of how's the board working. And I think, you know, we see it in lots of ways that, you know, last year people were still in that, you know, I'm thankful that my district didn't close for a whole year and that, you know, we managed the COVID crisis in a, way that met my child's needs as much as you could. And I just think we're in a very different place this year. And so this is the first of several opportunities for people to express how they're feeling. And I think we're going to see it on the superintendent survey again. I think we're going to see it on the administrator surveys.
Yeah, else, any other board members have thoughts just on your board function? Successful or not successful?
I think the success of any board, it's critical that all of the members of the board feel comfortable, having their say, feel comfortable asking for information, feel comfortable, requesting whatever they think they need to request in order for them to do their job and saying whatever they need to say, without kind of fear that it's not going to be fallback or repercussion. And I think that we clearly meet that standard. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I also think that we don't ask about this, but you know, those of us, you know, three of us who've been here a while, you know, have seen the shoe being on the other foot, is that a crucial element of any school board success is the relationship between the board and the superintendent. And I think this, you know, we have a very good relationship between the board and the superintendent. And, you know, that's critical for the board to do what it needs to do. And, at least in my opinion, that I would have to say that gets very high marks. So, you know, I think your point also about diversity of opinion is good. I mean, you know, I suppose there could be positives to everybody being in lockstep, but I also see some serious negatives on that, especially when it's that lockstep is with a certain degree of coercion behind it. And so diverse opinions are good, and people being willing to put them out there. So I'm not trying to pat us all on the back. I mean, I think we're doing all right.
Yeah, I can say is that one of the new members, I do feel like I've come to a place where I realize that I'm allowed to take up a certain amount of time and I can ask questions, and I appreciate there's a variety of channels of communication with the administration and the board. It did take a little while, but I think that was partly just the way that Orono elects its board, and also the time in particular last spring, which was contentious. So it was definitely a little unsettling at first, and I don't think that had anything to do with anybody in particular. The three of you were familiar with both board procedures and each other. You had just written out several years of contentious decisions. And so, you know, I think probably anybody new that was dropped into that would feel kind of unsettled. And I did for a while, but I am here again on purpose. So I would agree that it feels like an environment where you disagree, and there are no like negative repercussions. And you can ask, you can resist, you can ask for questions, and I think overall it's reasonable. I think those questions would be good.
Okay, everybody good to move on? All right, so by policy, we do have a superintendent survey, and by policy, the board has to agree on the content of that survey, and by state law, that has to be discussed publicly. You can't just have it in a document. So this is what we issued last year. This is based on ISLIC, International Society for School Leaders Consortium. It is the older, technically out of date, shorter version. There is an updated ISLIC standard, which has a T-cell, which is like 20 questions instead of 11 questions. And the board has consistently decided to stick with a shorter set of questions. And then on top of that, we have the goals. I would recommend we stick with the old ISLIC set of questions, 1 through 13. And the goals, in my mind, probably even we keep the same three goals about COVID, construction, and DEI as the three things we survey on. So I would propose we don't change anything to the survey from last year, but I'd love to hear different opinions.
You gotta tweak the language in 14, goal number 1. Maybe just, I agree with people with the language, especially since officially sometime in the next month, right?
Yeah.
May, and the crisis part will be over, although most people left that behind a long time ago. So maybe use some of the language that's in the current board goals for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of construction and DEI, absolutely, I think those should stay there. And then I think the other thing we always offer, you know, Meredith, the opportunity to add questions that she would be particularly interested in hearing on. And so I think we obviously should continue that practice. But otherwise, I agree with you. I'm pretty happy with the metric as it stands.
I agree. Meredith, anything you would change?
No, I think, you know, the first set of standards really hit a broad spectrum of topics. And so if we think about kind of the big picture, I think I would change the wording for 14. And I would say, you know, something about, you know, transition from, you know, crisis moving into post-COVID well, not saying it that way, probably, but.
Well, recovery, I think,
Yeah.
kind of recovery
Yeah,
is the
for
key
sure.
area, because I think that's, and that's not gonna go away. I mean, there's gonna be, this is gonna be years. We still don't even know, have a full handle on the impacts, right? So, but then that's gonna be a crucial part of the superintendent's job going forward, is figuring out how to recover what was lost during this point.
Okay, I will work on wording for that one question and get that survey issued. Yes, in coordination with Meredith, we can talk about, are you thinking it goes out with the principals or before the principals?
I haven't thought about it.
Okay.
Last year, did we do them separate?
We have traditionally done
I
them
think we've
separate for a
done-
few years at least.
Yeah, I think it just depended. I don't,
I think it's important.
I think it's a lot to send out for people all at once. If they have kids in multiple schools and do the special services one, so maybe to stagger them. Helps people not to feel like it's too much to even bother with,
We're gonna get a good survey
Rachel,
together.
maybe get this turned around before the April break then.
yeah.
Anything else on the board self-evaluation, sorry, the superintendent survey? All right, we're on to action items. We've switched 9G first, so we have new stipend proposal.
We have 4 tonight. The first one is the assistant track coach. And so that program is just bursting at the seams. Right now, I think yesterday they had 76. No. I think it
I
was-
heard last night it was 74 or
Oh,
something.
okay, 70.
I heard 79.
Well, that was how many came, like signed up on the list. And then yesterday was the first day of practice. So we, we think it's going to be
It's a lot.
70.
Yeah,
And, we've been talking in stipend committee about cleaning up a little bit more about where we have participation will warrant position and coming to some agreements on what those levels are so that, we all know what we're looking for. And so, with this, we definitely think that this is justified at this point, but stipend committee is working on kind of establishing some thresholds to help us with these flex positions moving forward. But in my opinion, when you get above 65, in the number of events, you really need another coach out there. So I bring this to you because the position started, and this is the reason that, we've had someone out there helping out with numbers. And so we're gonna add that person to the list here if we approve this position and approve them on the list of co-curriculars tonight. You want me to talk about all of them?
yeah,
And
we
then,
don't do all of it.
okay. The next one is the bus monitor scheduler, and this is really like bus van. And this is, where we have students on either buses or vans that require like an ed tech or someone to ride the bus to support their needs, to make sure they are able to be transported safely. So it's a special education service. It's called for an IEP. And so to have all the buses for ASA, morning and afternoon require a rider. I believe it's all of them. And then sometimes we have an older student that requires it, not always. And sometimes there's a van service that requires it. So there's a lot of, scheduling individuals into these roles. And they're not dedicated people who, your job is to just ride a bus. It's, ed techs usually who are other people, usually support staff who are assigned to do these roles. And if someone, can't do it, there needs to be someone else. It's kind of like a sub-color position, but arranging all of this. And it's been one of those jobs that's been passed around for special education teachers at ASA, and they've just kind of done it, as an additional duty without compensation. But we're at the point now where we just feel like it's time to compensate the individual who takes this on because it's a significant responsibility. And we have a cohort moving into the middle school where we're going to have scheduling for that group too. So that just adds another level of complexity of working across buildings, trying to schedule this. So that's why we're bringing this forward. Lisa, this came from Lisa and came through the committee. I support it. The other, next one is, unified basketball for the middle school. This is a really successful program we've had at the high school for a number of years. And, they ran a trial of this at the middle school this year, and it's been really, a successful trial run. And we'd like to start it as an official trial stipend and program next year. So we're requesting that next year be year one trial. And we do the trial for 2 years just to see, if we can have sustained interest and participation. And also, there's a growing number of programs around us to have games to play. And so as long as, that continues to be successful, we ran into some problems with weather and cancellations this year, so they didn't get in as many games as they had hoped. But I think, knowing and planning for this for the start next year will help it be successful.
So that was gonna be my question. There are other middle school games. I think this is great.
Yes, there are.
Awesome.
And then the final one is, a set of stipends that comes out of our DEI work. One of our goals is around student and family welcoming, and a part of that, program is really to develop, student ambassadors who will be, part of that welcoming plan for new students into the school community, and having those across all buildings. And we see that as a larger, program than just addressing DEI initiatives. But I think at its core, that's the genesis of why we wanted to start this as a district. But we think that, it also gives great leadership opportunities to students who are these ambassadors. But it helps us have something that's more even and more consistent across our schools. We have pockets of, great things happening across our schools where we welcome families. But really what's not there is like a sustained program over time that's consistent across the district. There's probably really strong, first couple of days kind of welcoming and making sure they have a tour and, arranging someone to sit with them at lunch. And, in classrooms, there might be a buddy assigned, but it's just not an even practice. And so having this program, we felt like will help maybe fill some holes that we identified through our equity audit, and have a formal program in place. We consider, this to be a pretty heavy lift to really develop it into the program we want it to be. And feel like this is probably a school-based position in each school that's going to run this, kind of like a club, but it'll also be working with a lot of staff to coordinate, needs across, different programs and different, times of year. So you see the positions, and we really base it on school enrollment, kind of thinking about a tiered approach to that. We did not do this as a trial, because we feel like it's gonna be a really heavy lift initially to help get the program off the ground, and felt like, we needed to really fund it in a way that was fair to what it's gonna take to design it and get it going. And I think, it's always a trial, right? And if this program doesn't work the way we hope, then we have to go back to the drawing board. But, we felt like the stipends needed to match what we see as the initial workload to get these programs going, and the way the DEI committee has, we researched it and gotten it to a certain point, but really we need to pass it off to someone to really take the reins to get it going. So those are the 4 different requests, with the ambassador really being 3 in 1.
Okay, in the interest of time, I was just gonna make a motion for all 4, but is there one that somebody would like to have separated out for a more detailed discussion? Seeing none, I would make a motion to approve, additional track high school, assistant coach stipend position, the new stipended position for, bus scheduling, bus monitor supervisor, the additional stipended position for middle school unified basketball, and the new stipended position for welcoming ambassador program. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up, we have nominations, or I just see two in the packet, there were more now.
Right, so we need to add one to the list if we add high school track assistant and Emily Francis.
Okay, so I would make a motion to approve the slate of, OMS stipend position appointments as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
And that includes Ellie Pierce, middle school softball boys, Molly Smith, middle school lunch supervisor number 2, and Emily Francis, OHS track assistant coach. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Disposition of equipment.
So Bill has asked that we, put the John Deere tractor up for sale that we've had in the back shed. We used to use this some for some snow clearing that we did in addition to what the town did. We really don't use it for that purpose anymore. He looked into, you know, what it might be worth. Bill, can you tell us what you think it might be worth?
Sure, in looking online, in the used market, it's still fetching $89,000. But when you put it up to bid, you just never know. My suggestion was to start at a $5,000 ask and see where it goes from there. I mean, we just don't use it. It's sitting in that shed since I've been here for a year and a half. We've maintained it, I've had it out, had it looked at, repaired, but we don't have any use of it.
Yeah, when you came, it needed a repair, didn't it?
Correct.
So we had to have it repaired. And, you know, if it just says it's going to need repair again, so.
I mean, it's got like 300 hours on it. I mean, it's still a fairly brand new tractor. It is 4-wheel drive. It has a snow blower in front, comes with a plow, and also has deck, grass cutting deck on it.
What did we use it for? Or,
Excuse me?
what did we use it for? Or-
Some snow clearing that was just, I really not sure if it was left over from when we used to do some grass cutting ourselves. I don't think so, because it's newer than that, I would think.
That is about a 2012, believe it or not. The town actually has one very similar to it.
So it probably is left over from when we did some grass cutting ourselves. And it was used to just do some snow clearing that we don't do anymore. We have Black Bear do the snow clearing for, they used to do the path out to Mountain View. But it's hard to get to that path with our staff in time for people to really, you know, be able to use that path in the morning. So Black Bear doesn't, they can do it more time.
I assume we follow the policy about offering it to the town first and all that.
Sorry.
If we followed the policy about offering it to the town first, I think, before we go to private sale.
I've actually talked to the town about it, and for the price, I just like I said to them, you know, we're looking at about probably starting a bid at 5,000, and I think when talking to Rob Jerks, I think they want to go through the bid process. My suggestion would be, if it goes out to bid and we don't sell it, is to go back and offer them. They're not looking for one right now. What they were telling me, now, if they came in at a good buy, they would probably look at it. But he also wanted to reach out to the town if they were going to purchase it. So when I looked at the cost and the price of it, he and I talked about it. You know, it's still running for $89,000. You know, so I decided, why don't we just look at bid for it? And then if it doesn't sell, maybe we talk to the town.
Okay. So I would make a motion to authorize the superintendent or designee to dispose of John Deere tractor at best available price. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up, we have policies. By the way, JLCB is going to be treated as a first read, not a revision, after some questions were raised from the community. So DFE, bottom line is we have the new PAC, which brings in gate receipts of substantial nature, comparable to football and basketball. And so that needed to be addressed somehow. Considerable discussion in the policy committee. And really, we decided that the best approach would be to make you know, as our general principle has been, athletics and other extracurriculars like, musicals are the same in this district and treated on the same footing. So the footing is that, annual operating costs are covered out of the, district budget. And, special events like team dinners are covered by boosters, parents. And that, the gate receipts then come back into a dedicated account for facilities capital expenses to maintain that particular facility. So in the athletics, so for example, you know, that balance gets up to 20-30,000, and then we spend it, we buy new seats in the gym for the, you know, the basketball games, or we buy new scoreboards or something like that. And the idea is basically Pat would now have a fund that we could use going forward if they need more gels on lights, or they, you know, kinds of capital expenses that you can get into a pack. So that there would be a dedicated maintenance fund for the pack. Yes.
Does this include, like, if we were to rent out the facility, or is that a separate?
That's a separate issue. There's a rental policy at Dan in the case that, yeah, I'd have to go look at that policy, but this is specifically about ticket sales
Ticket sales for like our program.
for our program. Yeah.
Yeah, those proceeds from renting out goes into a line for, that's specifically for that, and it can be used for maintenance and upkeep of facilities.
So it's a similar idea, but it's a separate policy. So that's basically the idea. So, I mean, you can read the text, but it captures what I described. And, there's a little carve out for, students who don't have enough money to buy their costumes, and there's a little carve out for if somebody wants to have a fundraiser for, you know, sick classmate or something like that. But basic idea is PAC ticket receipts go back into a fund for the PAC facilities, and the actual programs, whether it's stipends or costumes, are covered by the RSU budget, just like they are for sports. So I would make a motion to approve, policy BFD as a revision as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
And this has been run through, multiple people in ours, it's been run through the policy committee, it's had a pretty thorough process at this point, I think everybody's happy with it. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up is the third policy, BFF, which is just making it clear that, not every extracurriculars with gate receipts, namely the PAC, are separate from student activity funds. That's really the only change that's going on here. Crossing out that first sentence about gate receipts and make it clear that's now in the policy BFD. So I would make a motion to approve policy BFF as as a revision as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. I got you. Next up, IKF graduation requirements. This was a change brought in from the administrators at the high school. And we've been talking about this for a while, but in particular, the changes that, for students graduating, coming into high school starting next year, the new requirement will be to have, basically to switch half a credit from PE to health. So it's switching within the PE health domain, but, as you can see, it's dropping phys ed from 1.5 to 1 credits, and it's taking health up from 0.5 to 1. This has been worked through the, curriculum committee. You guys already saw the proposed health courses and their changes. And this is just implemented as a graduation requirement. I think the feeling is there's just too much going on in kids' lives by the time you get into social media and body image and sexuality and everything else that is really need the full year, 2 semesters even. So I would make a motion to adopt IKF as a revision as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Question, so with, swapping half the credit from PE over to health, the courses Healthy Bodies and Wellness or equivalent, and Healthy Relationships and FD or equivalent, you said those have been developed already?
Yeah,
But not taught, not been taught yet.
not taught. But there's detailed so by which I think we approved last.
Are we gonna hold off and, class 27?
Next year's class. Yeah.
Those will start to be offered next year, and those classes will meet the requirement for any upperclassmen that need a health credit, so. Like if a 10th, 11th, or 12th grader hasn't taken a health credit, they can take one of those to meet their health credit.
So they're open to 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a little bit separate from actual graduation requirements, but one of the ongoing conversations is trying to encourage students. Students come in with this formula of I have to take this as a freshman, I have to take this as a sophomore, and it ends up constraining them more than it helps them. So increasingly trying to make it clear that, you can take help. We're dropping titles like English 9, not completely, but we're trying to head in that direction. I believe I made a motion. Is there a second on it?
It was.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. The next one was an update to the immunization policy. We were going to do it as a revision. It's one of these cases where we had a policy on the books. Drummond and Woodson's, recommended MSMA policy didn't actually change that much of the policy, but just, because the formatting didn't match up, it was hard to get it, to report it. It's just small changes. But the main change is updating the current laws around, basically state law has taken away philosophical and religious exemptions and left only a medical exemption, so we were trying to match that. That said, the policy we took from Drummond and Woodson has a phrase in here.
Requires students to
Yeah,
provide
each year.
documentation for
Each year.
the medical
B.
yearly, which the law does not.
Correct.
Right, the law is vague or unspecific about how the documentation.
So did we just pull that from Drummond?
We pulled that from Drummond and Woodson, and we're doing research. The nurse is looking into the DOE guidance, and if that doesn't work, we'll talk to the lawyer where that came from. I mean, I think it's probably good to have some time. I don't think the law implies you can file a medical certificate at age 5 and it stands until age 17. I think the law is just vague, but, anyway, we wanted some more time to think this through. So this is coming forward just as a first read at this point, even though it could have been a revision, but we didn't want to vote on it tonight, given some questions. So I would make a motion to recognize policy JLCB as having had a first read. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I will say that was my concern as well, that each year part specifically, and I understand this came from John Woodson, I know, nothing personal. In looking at the law is less restrictive than the Drummond and the Woodson policy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, and that section G down below, that phrase each year is, yeah. I think to my mind, the law is vague and is specific, but it may be too restrictively specific, so that's the conversation to have. Okay, so there's a motion to recognize just the first read, which means it have to come back to the board at least 2 weeks from now, possibly more, as we get this wrapped up. Any other discussion or questions?
I would agree that, we obviously want to follow, the law where it makes sense. And maybe the yearly is too restrictive. On the other hand, I am concerned with the scenario you point out, that just set it and forget it, right? Like a kid comes in kindergarten and has an exemption and it's never returned to again. So that could be 13 years if we're talking about pre-K kids. So I think there's got to be somewhere in between every year and once and done.
Might be that every 3 years, I mean, it might be a reasonable interpretation of law too. We're gonna have to talk to the state and talk to the lawyers.
It's still by the state.
Yeah,
I mean, I know there was a lot of, I'm not sure that rulemaking is the right word, but procedures that came out of the DOE with this change. guidance for school nurses and how they were, needed to handle exclusions and giving notice and giving people so much time to comply with the changes in law, so. I'll be interested to see what Karen finds when she goes back and tries to track down where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, the DOE may have issued a regulation interpreting the law that says every year, we just don't know right now. Okay, go ahead and vote on the first reading, knowing it's coming back. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Committees, keeping in mind we still have items after that.
We have
Policy,
first proposal.
oh, sorry, first proposal, new first proposal,
That's contemporary world. Let's see.
contemporary world issues, that was brought to the curriculum committee with that packet of all those courses we saw last time around. Mark raised some issues which caused some changes. It's been, I think, through curriculum committee again, and it's now come to the board for approval. I would make a motion to authorize the creation of the new course, Contemporary World Issues in Social Studies. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion or questions?
I will say that I pointed out the curriculum committee, and I think it's still a standing question as to whether or not we will support in-person attendance at the conference. I think that's a fiscal question, and I think there's a virtual option that I think we could use that often I think is used, so I think that's something we'll have to consider.
I can speak to that, Meredith. So it isn't in-person attendance at the conference. It's that the Camden Conference supports an event for the high school students who are working with them. And so the funding for attendance at that event was not to attend the conference, but was to participate in the events designed for the high school students who are together participating virtually in the conference.
Right, so I think that's a question that we'll have to determine, can we fund their participation in, it's an in-person conference attendance, so I think that's not something that I think we can. I don't feel comfortable approving this and not putting just a caveat there to say that that's not necessarily part of the approval.
Do we have any other courses that have a field trip component that's funded?
No, not at that level anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a fair caveat. I will support exploring that. Anything else? All those in favor of the new course? Passes 5-0. Subcommittee reports. I'm gonna try and move these along quickly. Policy subcommittee. We're rotating through policies. I guess, yeah, it'll be next week, a week from Thursday. Will be our next policy subcommittee, and we are going to go through the entire review process this year before the board retires for the summer. UTC.
It was a brief Zoom meeting. It was a snowy Thursday night and we just conducted business with nothing to report.
Yeah, Bruce.
I apologize if I repeat this, because I don't remember if we had a board meeting after we met last, but we did meet on a snowy Thursday as well. We drove in though. And it was because we had to approve budgets. So the budgets have been approved. That's what we did at the last meeting.
Kind of cushy over on UTC.
They're very accommodating.
We're real steel down there.
Curriculum subcommittee. I'm guessing, well, no, it's probably met since the last board meeting. Any report on curriculum?
I don't know that we did. I know that we revisited the contemporary world issues course, right? And so then
Talked about, Susan's unmuted.
Susan, anything you want to say?
Yeah, we revisited the course, and I also got some feedback on some collection processes that we've been using for Wabanaki Studies in Technology. And we'll take a look at where we are with curriculum work next, coming up in April.
I did forget to say there were a couple of comments from parents about, I have no idea what's happening with curriculum, which I think is a fair comment from a parent's point of view. So I mean, it's great that that's coming to a capstone, but I think that's a thing to think about too. Facilities and Building Committee did meet and we discussed the capital improvement plan that you all saw. Oh yeah, we were gonna do an update on, I think we discussed the possibility of getting out of the contract with Honeywell to do the ventilation work at ASA and start a new contract, and that has been executed. We are out of the contract with Honeywell, and we are working with an architect meeting next week to, start talking about putting that out to bid fresh. Did cost us some money to get out of the contract, but we're gonna save a whole lot more money than that, and I think we may actually get functionality closer to what we want as well, so. Definitely win,
And we walked away with the plans that Honeywell developed for us, should we decide to use part of those.
it's just, you know, in fairness to everybody, construction, inflation and construction costs have been all over the map, so it's been a very hard process to, get a handle on, but we're reasonably confident we're gonna walk away with a big win out of that. Is there another contract we're gonna update people on? No, it's just the two sides of that, yeah. Okay, wellness committee,
We have, MOU for the outdoor space that, you know, it's signed in towns,
Well, I haven't signed.
or you didn't sign.
It's just, we've said that that looks good, and they're gonna do their part, and then we'll bring it to,
There.
Yeah.
No more than that. So we're still working on that, and I think we're gonna meet April 3rd, next Thursday, April 6th at 2 p.m. Talk about snacks and food and some more outdoors.
great. I mean, I didn't mention it, I'm glad Kevin mentioned it, but recess did pop up several times. It seems to me like a topic that is appropriate for the wellness committee if you have an interest in that.
Yeah, I can, but,
DI leadership team is meeting, I believe it's this Thursday.
Yeah.
And the 5 subcommittees have been working away, so we'll have more to update that next time. Any other business? Any future agenda item requests? Anybody still awake want to make a public comment? Seeing none, our next meeting is April 11th, 2 weeks from tonight at 6 p.m. on Zoom and in the library. Does anybody on the board have a request for information or follow-up? Okay, we are going to go into executive session. We will not take any action after executive session except for adjournment. So unless you really want to watch the paint dry, you don't need to hang around to watch it to adjourn.
we'll actually stop this here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A, discussion of confidential personnel matters. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? 5-0. We'll go ahead and go into executive session. Thanks, everybody.
All right, I'm gonna walk this.
Thank you.